Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was the Devil Who Ended Hero Society? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Soul marks have always been a mystery, far longer than when quirks first emerged. It was a mystery that will never be solved of how soul marks came to be, but one thing is common: soul marks are to be cherished. Soul identifiers are also a thing of mystery. A mark, if a person has one, always appears at BRH and are always gray. The gray goes away when one part of the bond realizes who they are, normally in the teenage years, and an identifier appears in that part of the bond. A mark that is considered complete is a mark with no gray areas. For example, a boy and a girl are platonic soulmates, two gray spots on the wrists, and when the boy realizes who he is, one part of the bond turns blue, the other part still gray, and when it is finally completed, the soulmates will find each other. A completed mark is always noticeable to the soulmate. When soulmates meet, a click in their soul will sound. A soul identifier is always unique to the person. The identifier can appear as a word, object, animal, a solid color, or even a symbol of the person's quirk. It will always be unique. There are different kinds of soul marks. Romantic marks appear above the heart, always a mix of the partner's soul identifiers. Platonic marks appear on either the wrists or the ankles, identifiers mixed. But the rarest soul mark is soul family. A soul family is a group of people who are platonic soulmates with everyone in the family. It is so rare that only 20 soul families have appeared in the last 50 years. A family which is more than multiple friends, they are a part of each other's soul. A soul family is also unique in the way that the mark is more of a design of lines intersecting each other, solid colors only. This mark will always appear on the stomachs of the family. In historical whispers, it is possible to have romantic marks on some of the family members. 2 members or more can have romantic marks, but this does not conflict with the soul family. A soul family of 10. A fall of a society. Broken and fractured people, only healed when together. A boy that was too young to fight. A girl too fractured by words to heal. A boy too crushed by the dreams of a man to be saved from himself. A boy formed to be different by a man who told the boy he was safe. A boy turned into something other than human, ripped from the hands of his best friend. A man who just needed acceptance. A man who wanted to follow the footsteps of his family. A man who was spit on by society because of his quirk. A woman who was a man but society said no. A boy who was too young to go to war with clipped wings, forced into a rule too harsh for a boy. Heroes and villains. An age-old fight, but who says that heroes are always good and villains are always evil? The lines are blurred and the downfall of society started with only one simple bullet. It all started with Midoriyas Izuku, the devil. Kaken, come on. Izuku ran in front of his mother and she gestured for him to slow down. Izuku only giggled and hid behind her. Izuken, hiding behind auntie is unfair. Bakugo Katsuki, nicknamed Kaken by Izuku, came running after Izuku. Katsuki attempted to catch Izuku, but Izuku ran again. Boys, just remember to come back in an hour. "'Kay, Mom." "Got it, Auntie." Katsuki raced after Izuku into the forest near their houses. Katsuki attempted to get ahead but failed to catch up with Izuku. Both stopped in front of the fallen tree, both out of breath from their run. Katsuki looked at Izuku with disbelief. "How are you so fast? I couldn't even touch you." Izuku looked at his best friend and said with mischief in his eyes, "Secret." Katsuki growled and attempted to tackle Izuku. Izuku just laughed and ran out of his grasp. This started another race with the blonde-haired boy. "Hey Kaken, want to play hide and seek?" "Hell no. You will just use your quirk to cheat again." "It's not cheating, Kaken." "Yes it is." This started a whole other argument with the two boys. This went for a while until the boys realized it had been an hour and had to go back home. "This is your fault." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." Before the situation gets out of hand again, Both boys saw Inko looking for them at the edge of the forest. Inko looked at the two boys with kind eyes and a smile. Her green hair pulled up into a ponytail. Izuku, Katsuki, it's time for dinner, I made katsudon. The two boys, obviously happy about the dinner plans, started walking with Inko to the Midoriyas' apartment. While walking, Izuku tripped with a grimace on his face. Inko, seeing this, held Izuku's hand with understanding in her green eyes. Katsuki, also seeing this, went to Izuku to see what was wrong. Your quirk troubling you again, Izuku? Yeah. Izuku, seeing the concern in his mom's eyes, nodded and grasped her hand tighter in his grip. His head bowed and eyes shut in pain. A spike of pain going through his head. Too loud for his liking. The thoughts of people in his area are too loud and overpowering. Inko smoothed his hair in a maternal gesture and smiled sadly. You will get a handle on your quirk, don't worry about it, Izuku. Izuku pouted, a bit frustrated. I can't be a hero if I can't handle my quirk. Inko, seeing the frustration, spoke in a soothing voice and declared with a confident voice. You are a boy, Izuku, no one has perfect control over their quirk when they are young. Katsuki still has problems with not detonating his quirk, and I know his teachers call him a genius. Everyone's different, Izuku, but I know you will be able to use your quirk freely when the time comes. Izuku looked up at her, opening his eyes and mumbled a quiet thanks. Inko smiled and started walking back home, with the two boys in tow. When the three got there, they were greeted with the Bakugas, Mitsuki and Misuru. The shrimps better have been good today, Inko. I don't want to get called in for another explosion complaint. Inko laughed and said to her best friend, no, they were perfectly behaved. Mitsuki, obviously happy with that, went back setting up the table with her husband. The food is ready, munchkins, so go wash up, you both smell like dirt. The said munchkins went to wash up while the adults finished setting the table. The Midoriya home was an apartment, but was obviously well loved, with used furniture and a warm and homey atmosphere. The two boys came back from the bathroom and jumped into chairs, sitting next to each other at the table, and all the adults sat too. The next few minutes were filled with clattering of utensils and the munching of food coming from the kids. When the eating came to a slow stop, the conversation started. My teachers are saying I am the best again. Katsuki looked miffed about this with his juvenile face scrunched up. The adults looked at each other with knowing looks. They say I am the best, but Izuku's quirk is so cool and they don't see it. Hag and Dad said Izuku's quirk is awesome too, but why do they have to pressure me all the time? The Bakugas looked at Inko to explain. Inko nodded and looked at Katsuki, and Katsuki looked back at her, still miffed. Honey, the teachers will always say that you're going to be the best because of your quirk. It is flashy and powerful, perfect for heroics, and they know you want to be a hero. You just have to remember that you cannot let their words get to you. Good words are good for you to an extent, but if it goes overboard you can become a person you hate. Your teachers also look over Izuku because he is older than you. Katsuki opened his mouth, but Inko carried on. Izuku also has a mental quirk that is hard to control. It is hard to use his quirk without a headache and pain. Your teachers don't understand that his quirk is powerful because it is not obvious, Katsuki. Katsuki still looked a bit frustrated but let the argument drop. The Bakugas looked relieved that Inko got through to him. Izuku looked down with frustration in his eyes. He's 8, he should at least be able to use his quirk, like the rest of his class. He wants to be able to use his quirk, to become a hero like All Might. He can't be partners with Kaken if he can't use his quirk. Tears started to gather in his eyes. Another pain in his head just reminded him of his troubles. Dinner came to an end. The adults started cleaning up and the boys went to Izuku's room, filled with hero memorabilia, specifically All Might merch. The boys started playing with hero figurines and then Izuku spoke. Hey Kaken, do you think I can be a hero when I can't even use my quirk? Katsuki looked like Izuku just slapped him. Course you can. I didn't pick a loser to be my hero partner. And you idiot, your quirk is cool as hell, don't say that shit again, or I will have to beat you up. Izuku, after Katsuki said that, had tears in his eyes and nodded. After that, it was time for the Bakugas to go home. Bye Kaken. See ya, nerd. Inko just looked onto the scene with warm eyes, a kind smile on her face. Inko then ushered Izuku back inside. It was nearing 9 and it was time for Izuku to go to sleep. Come on, I am 8, I don't have to go to bed at 9. Inko just smiled again and said, Katsuki is 7 and he goes to bed at 9 and we have to get up early tomorrow to go to the doctor's. Izuku pouted but pulled up his blanket. Once he was comfortable, Inko kneeled and kissed Izuku on the head. Good night, Izuku. Izuku woke up with Inko gently shaking him awake. It took a couple of minutes for the boy to completely wake up. Izuku put on a t-shirt and jeans and went out to eat breakfast with his mom. Once finished with breakfast, Inko cleaned up the dishes. Mom, don't you have work after the doctor's? Inko, looking down at her son, said, I took an off day today, so I can stay with my favorite boy. Izuku, happy with this, had a bright smile on his face. A whole day with Mom. He giggled happily, a sun-filled smile on his face. Izuku and Inko left the apartment, taking the train to the clinic. Inko checked Izuku in for his yearly visit at the front desk. The freckled boy swung his legs idly on the chair waiting for his name to be called. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku jumped up, and with his mom walked to the nurse lady waiting with a clipboard. The nurse handed the clipboard to Inko to fill it out. Inko went through it and frowned. Everything was good, but she had to check the problem with quirk, bubble. Inko discreetly sighed. The nurse brought the tiny family to a room and told them to wait for the doctor. The room was nice for a hospital with hero posters and stuffed animals. Izuku was eyeing an All Might plushie when the doctor came in. Hello, Mrs. Midoriya and Mr. Midoriya, how have you been this year? The doctor was the one they went to every year, good at his job, and Inko got a background check and came back clean, so Inko trusted him. All good, Dr. Kuratashi. Izuku has been good this year. I would expect nothing less, but let's get this big guy on the examination chair. Izuku walked over to the laying down chair thing and jumped up onto it. The paper crinkled when he sat down. Dr. Kuratashi went through the standard procedure. When he was done examining Izuku, he told Izuku to go sit with his mother while he typed up the most recent information on Izuku's files. Izuku is a perfectly healthy 8-year-old, even if he is shorter than average, but that is not a problem. I want to ask about his quirk, still having trouble? Inko nodded, apprehensive, but necessary, she spoke. Izuku has been controlling his range better than last year, but still results in headaches and pains in his head. He is still young, so I am not really worried. Dr. Kuratashi nodded and said, That is normal, Mrs. Midoriya. Mind-reading quirks like Izuku's are generally like this, especially with one of Izuku's strength. You also marked down a recent development with his quirk? I want to hear about that as well so I can update his registry. Inko nodded and said while looking at Izuku, who was looking down at the floor. Izuku has recently been able to project his thoughts into someone else's mind, a couple of weeks ago. Me and my friends think his quirk is evolving. Is that possible? The doctor contemplated for a second and said, It is possible that his quirk hasn't fully manifested yet. That might be the reason that it is hard to control. You said Izuku was a late bloomer last time? Inko nodded and said, He was almost 6 when he got his quirk. The doctor made a HM sound and stated, I am not a specialist in quirks, but in university there is a mandatory class for quirk science in children because all doctors need that in this day and age. In this class there is something called quirk strain theory. When a child first gets their quirk, the quirk is significantly weaker than in adulthood. Some people say this because the adult has more practice in their quirk, but this theory hypothesizes something else. A quirk is like a muscle in the body. Everyone has muscles, but children's muscles are always weak because they are still growing and have not fully developed. A fully developed muscle normally happens when reaching adulthood. The same can be said about quirks. A fully developed quirk in a child may have some negative health effects, so the body limits the quirk until the body is ready for it. Or you can say that the quirk is not fully developed yet, so the quirk is stronger than what is being displayed. That is what I think is happening with little Izuku here. His quirk is not fully developed and his body is growing with it like growth pains, like when a person grows taller. I personally believe you will see new developments in Izuku's quirk in the next coming years, not many, but significant. Inko thought it over and asked, So the reason why he gets headaches is because his brain is not used to using his quirk and adjusting to it? The doctor nodded. His quirk is already a powerful one. A mind-reading quirk with communication abilities is a rare quirk. I truly think the name mental capacity is a truly fitting name for Izuku's quirk. Inko nodded, worried on her mind for her boy's future. Thank you, doctor, for your insight. No problem, Mrs. Midoriya, it's my job after all. Oh, and Izuku. The doctor kneeled down in front of Izuku. I am happy you will have a big family in the future. Izuku blushed and nodded thanks to Dr. Kuratashi. The Midoriyas left the clinic and started going back to their apartment. Inko looked down at her son, thinking, Izuku is going to have a hard time. If his quirk is going to get stronger, I fear I might have to get quirk suppressors for him. He is having a hard enough time trying to control mental capacity now. His quirk may be a mutation, but I wish I can help him just a bit more. His range got bigger a couple of weeks ago and I truly fear someone might find out about that. Hey Mom, can we watch the new All Might movie please? Inko shook those thoughts out of her head and smiled down at her son. Of course, sweetie. Izuku smiled brightly and skipped the way back home, humming happily. When the two came back home, they got ready with snacks and popcorn. When the movie was just about to start, Izuku whispered, the doctor said my quirk is still growing, so does this mean I can't use my quirk for years? Izuku whispered this in a teary tone, admitting how much this is troubling him. Inko sat next to Izuku and made sure to look Izuku in the eye. Izuku, sweetie, I love you no matter what, even if you were quirkless that would not change. Quirks are not all there is about people. Never forget that, Izuku. Look at Katsuki, he is your friend and he thinks your quirk is cool even if you can't use it. I also know that your soul family won't care either. Izuku looked back at his mom, with tears in his eyes. He hugged her tightly. Inko hugged back just as tight. The family of two watched the movie, Izuku, butting in every so often to recreate the iconic lines of All Might. By the time the movie was over, it was already 2 o'clock. Inko was getting lunch ready when she saw Izuku gripping his shirt in his fists with a question in his green eyes. Izuku, what is it? Inko asked, concerned. Mom, why do you think soul families are so rare? Inko got the implication. Izuku, you don't have to think that you are going to replace me. Izuku's head shot up, not realizing Inko read him like a book. I am your mother and I will always be there for you. A soul family is a blessing. People who will help and love for who you are, same with platonic soulmates, just with more people. I may only have a romantic mark, but I know for sure that your family is going to love you. So don't worry, Izuku. Inko patted Izuku's green-haired head and started lunch. Mom always makes good food. Izuku ate his food happily, head bobbing freely, feet swinging below the chair. After Izuku was done, he helped Mom clean up. Izuku just finished, when the voices started coming in despite his best efforts. Why is this happening? Mommy is always so bossy. I hope the food is ready. My grades need work, study more, less anxiety, boom, problem solved. This is all bullshit. Izuku, you're hearing people's thoughts again. Izuku looked up into his mom's green eyes and nodded at the statement. Mom just nodded and offered a hug. Izuku jumped into it. His mom always felt warm and it made Izuku feel safe. Izuku, why don't you take a nap? You always get tired after hearing people's thoughts. Izuku nodded and released hold on his mom and went to his bedroom. All Might's face stares at the green-haired boy when he crawls into bed. Izuku lifts his shirt and sees his marks. A soul family mark, 10 lines intertwined into a swirl, 6 lines already colored. A vibrant light blue line, a purple line, a pink line, a tan line, a dark blue line, and a dark green line. Izuku doesn't know how to feel about how most of his soul family is older than him. The 4 other lines are still gray, but what always catches his attention whenever he looks at his marks is his romantic mark. His romantic mark is connected to 2 of the gray lines, and those lines lead to 2 gray blobs above his heart. His heart always warms to see that one of his soul family is also his romantic soulmate. Izuku is starting to get sleepy and starts to nod off. His last coherent thought is, I can't wait to meet them. Tuya walked down the street with a mask over his face. He looked over the crowd for an easy mark. Tuya found one, and left the street 20 minutes later, $100 richer. Tuya shuffled the money into his ratty jacket pocket. He headed back to the place he was squatting in recently. When Tuya arrived at his apartment, he took a shower, a cold one, and when he was finished, looked at his chest, covered in horrendous scars and his soul marks, a soul family and a romantic mark that connected with his soul family mark, a vibrant light blue line and a gray line intertwined each other to 2 gray spots above his heart. Can't wait to see who is insane enough to be marked with me. Himikyo sat in her bedroom, hiding from her parents. She was silently crying while her parents fought over the freak. Himiko heard a thump, and then more screaming. Himiko curled up more. I want to go to my real family. I want my one and only. Himiko just sniffled more when she heard her door creak open. Get up, Hawks. Villains won't let you. Get up, if you can't, that just means you are weak. Are you weak, Hawks? Kigo stands, staggers, but stays standing. His handler, satisfied, immediately attempted to punch him in the stomach again. Kigo noticed this, and used his wings to fly away. His handler came forward once again. I want to see my family. His handler, not liking Hawks thinking in a fight, punched him in the nose. Get out. We don't want your kind in this house anymore. Magna was bodily thrown out of the house. Mother, father, do you want to kick out your own daughter? Her father looked down from her from the doorway. We don't have a daughter, we had a son but he is gone now. With that he slammed the door shut. I want a real family. No, I do have family, just have to find them. Continue. The video game said, before it was promptly disintegrated. It was just a shitty RPG anyway, I didn't need it. Tamura scratched his neck. His room was empty, with only a TV stand that held a TV just a few short moments earlier, and a bed. The hand on his face was suffocating. Tamura muttered, I'm bored. My family probably won't be boring, Kurogyri is, but maybe he is just an outlier. Kurogyri sighed. Tamura decayed another TV. The teenager was truly temperamental. Nevertheless, a warm feeling arises with the thought of Tamura being happy. Maybe it is his duty with taking care of Tamura, or it is from the fact Tamura and Kurogyri are a part of the same family. Kurogyri continued cleaning the bar. I hope we find the rest of the family soon, at the very least, for Tamura's sake. Can you do another trick for me, mister? Seiko looked at the small child in front of him and smiled through his stage mask. Of course, a magician always has another trick up their sleeve. Seiko used his quirk to make more impressive tricks. The crowd cheered, put some money in a box and walked off. This went on for the whole day. After the sun began to fall, Seiko counted the money. Only $200, won't last me a week. Seiko sighed, robbery it is again. I hope my family is doing better than me. Iguchi, get your butt down here. The school said you were causing trouble again. Yeah, trouble, Iguchi grumbled. Just some anti-mutation fanatics. The school was full of them. It wasn't his fault his quirk made him look like a gecko. They just loved harassing him. I just hope my family isn't put off by my quirk. Iguchi! Coming! Jean lit a cigarette. Jean breathed out and he watched the smoke filter through the air. He can hear the streets bustling with people. Jean looked over the streets and wondered, is my family walking on that street? I hope I won't weird them out. I want to order a kill command. Who, MDM president? There is a pesky lawyer sniffing around things she shouldn't. Make it look like an incident unconnected to the commission. A picture slid across the table. A picture of a short woman with long green hair in a high ponytail on the back of her head. Green eyes that look kind. The woman wore a business suit. Innocent in appearance. The picture was taken in a street, the woman coming from work. She is a competent lawyer, tried to hire her a couple years back. Make sure the job is done. If her child gets in the way, kill the child as well. Her name is Midoriya Inko and her son's name is Midoriya Izuku. Quirks, attraction and mental capacity. Here are their updated files. Inko went to work early. She hates leaving Izuku, even if it is for school. She knows the kids are harsh to Izuku because he can't control his quirk. At least Izuku has Katsuki. Inko smiled when thinking about the brash boy. She was happy that Mitsuki's son is friends with hers. Inko got into her office and started sorting out what she needed to do for today. There are multiple cases on her desk that she has to sort through. There is one case that sticks out to her though, and has been for the past couple of weeks. A case against the Commission for endangering children. There have been hushed complaints about some of the Commission employees going to houses with children who have heroic quirks, offering a head start into the child's career. It took a while for Inko to have any evidence of this occurring. Inko found evidence that the Commission has been recruiting children into working for them when they become adults. Inko was especially horrified by this revelation. There is a reason that hero schools moved to hero universities instead. The stress for saving people's lives in high school was too much for teenagers to reliably learn. UA was the first to move to university format with Nizu taking charge. Inko couldn't imagine the strain if a child started training to become a hero at a young age. That is why Inko has been working hard to gather as much evidence against the Commission as possible. Her only regret is that she hasn't spent much time with Izuku these past couple of weeks. There was a knock on her office door. Inko looked up and said, "Come in." Inko's coworker opened the door and explained, "There is someone in the lobby who said something about his child." Inko got up right away and said thank you to her. Inko walked briskly, worrying about her client. There was a man, in ragged clothing, who looked like he could use a bath. Inko walked up to him and spoke, "Mr. Misashi, how can I help you today?" Misashi looked around and said, whispering, "Can I speak to you in private?" Inko nodded and led him into her office. When her door shut, Misashi spoke in a rushed manner, "The Commission is back again. They said they would give me money to help raise Yui. I was suspicious and they said the only thing they need is my signature. I didn't sign, but they were subtly threatening me the entire time. I don't know what to do." Misashi looked crestfallen, sad that he couldn't really do anything. Inko studied him for a second and explained, "I am working on a case against the Commission, so don't worry. I will keep your daughter away from the Commission. You have my word." Misashi looked relieved. "Mrs. Midoriya, I don't know what I would do without you." Inko just smiled. Misashi left and Inko worked on her other cases. When it was time to go pick up Izuku from school, she left her office, knowing she would have to return later that afternoon to work on the Commission case. She is worried about going against the Commission, but she has to save the children. Izuku was waiting for her in front of the school. "Mom." Izuku jumps into her arms. Inko hugged her soon and whispered playfully in his ear, "Time to go home?" Izuku nodded, fluffy green hair bouncing. Inko held the little boy's hand and was thinking about her case. Her son by her side didn't notice her contemplative face was on. Inko, even in deep thoughts, noticed Izuku tense up and yelled, "Mom." And then there was an explosion in the street, with low-level villains seemingly coming out the woodworks, apparently fighting together. In the span of a few seconds, the street became a war zone, filled with around 50 villains on the street, fighting each other, using quirks and knives against each other. Territory fight. Then realized what was happening. Inko picked up Izuku and ran away from the fight. Izuku was hiding in her chest, curled up and trembling. Inko focused on her son for a second and went back to running away. "I just have to exit the street. I can run home after that." While Inko was running, she noticed pedestrians running away too. What she didn't notice was a man in casual clothes, looking at her with sharp eyes. Inko ran past this man, not thinking twice. The street was in utter chaos. The once lively street is filled with screams of fear and the sound of multiple running feet. Inko looked around for a safe area. All she could see was panicking civilians, some on their phone, calling the police most likely. The villains' fights were just getting more out of hand. Inko saw one of the villains getting stabbed by another and going down, collapsing. That is when it fully hit the green-haired woman that this was a life-or-death fight and she was in the middle of it with her 8-year-old son. All she was thinking was to protect Izuku and hope that the police and heroes would come fast. Then the next thing she heard was a bang and felt a pain in her chest. Inko stumbled and hid behind a car that was by her. All she felt was pain, and when she looked down at her chest, right above the heart, was a growing red stain, blood seeping out of her body. "Mom." Her son looked at her with scared eyes, tears dripping down his face, visibly afraid. Even when Inko was in pain, Dying, she put on the most warmth she could and smiled at her son and whispered, "Mom will always love you, Izuku. Don't forget that. I will always be proud of you." Blood was crawling up her throat as she talked, breathing becoming increasingly harder. Pierced lung. Inko knew the next few words were going to be precious to Izuku, and she was afraid she would leave her little boy all alone in this unforgiving world. She wasn't afraid of dying, she had a good life, but Izuku should not have to see her die. Inko coughed, blood finally out of her throat. "Izuku, I might not be here, but I know you will do great, Izuku. Just remember where you came from, and who brought you there. You will not be alone, Izuku, you have a family, remember that when you are lonely. I love you, my little Esuinsure." With that, Inko was losing strength to keep her head up. Her hearing went murky, eyes spinning from blood loss, but what she could still see was her baby boy yelling at her to stay, tears in his precious green eyes, tears flowing freely. "I am so sorry, Izuku, Mom is leaving you." With that, she lost the last of her strength, eyes closing for the rest of time. "Mom. Wake up, Mom, please." All Izuku remembers was hearing thoughts of the villains, about to attack, trying to warn his mom picking him up and running away. Then there a bang and Mom hid behind a car, Mom sitting there and Mom then put him down. That is when he saw the blood. Mom was growing paler the more she talked, every second growing whiter. Izuku was afraid for his mom, the best woman in the world. He was even more afraid when she coughed up blood. She smiled at him and talked, Izuku not really knowing what she meant, and then she closed her eyes, not waking up. He tried to shake her awake, but nothing was working. She wouldn't wake up. Nothing was working. "Mom, wake up, wake up, wake up, why won't you wake up?" His terrified shouting alerted the remaining people hiding in the streets, looked at him and saw the body that was once Inko and paled. No one dared to move out of their hiding spots, to share the same fate as her. Izuku grew more frantic, the longer she was not awake, until he was completely incapable of anything else than trying to wake up his. Izuku then heard from his quirk, uncontrollable right now, panic overtaking him, another person's thoughts. That was the great Midoriya Inko? She died easier than expected. Job accomplished. The commission is sure to pay me a lot for this job. Izuku just froze, and looked sharply at a passerby, with a suspicious bulge in his pocket, thoughts coming from him. All Izuku could think is, his mom is dead, the commission hired someone to kill her. After that Izuku just snapped, something in his mind already stressed broke and splintered into tiny pieces. All he remembered was screaming, "Why?" in his head, then black. Izuku blacked out for an undetermined amount of time, got up from where he was laying and looked around. And what he saw would be in his nightmares for the rest of his life. Everyone was dead, collapsed with eyes and noses bleeding. He felt something dripping down his face. He was in shock, everything felt numb. Izuku stood up, almost tripped and looked around with numb eyes. All the villains were dead, same with the civilians. All Izuku could do was stand there, staring blankly. His mom's body by him, crumpled against a car. He just stood there until the police came. He didn't even notice that he was moving. The last thing he remembers was a woman picking him up and putting him into a car, out of it to ask her where they were going. "We have a situation." The president of the commission was watching the city out of her window in her office. The clear night sky and moon shining brightly. The city lights showing a breathtaking view over the city. The president turned around and saw her secretary, bowing his head politely, but shaking in his hands showed that something had truly happened. "What is the problem?" The president looked back to the scene and showed her back to her employee. "Midoriya Inko has been successfully called, but the situation is not good. The plan went off without a hitch until Midoriya died. Her son who was with her lost control of his quirk and killed the paid-off low-level villains and 17 civilians, with a total of 65 casualties, including the hired hitman. Midoriya Izuku is currently in our custody but is in a significant amount of shock and most likely does not know where he is." The president took all this information with a stoic face. Midoriya Inko was successfully called but her son ended up becoming more troublesome. The president looked at her subordinate and stated, The commission has successfully captured and detained the villain responsible for this tragic massacre, and will be taken to Tartarus for a life sentence, death penalty possible if not rehabilitated. Midoriya Izuku was unfortunately not found at the scene and is presumed dead. That is the story the public will hear. Make it possible. Pay off or silence anyone at the scene for that to be the official story. Make the story break in a week or later. The media will have catched wind of this incident in due time. Make them spin the story. The secretary voiced, a bit apprehensive, Midoriya Izuku is 8 years old. Is Tartarus really the best option? Don't question my orders. The voice of the president changed, tone dangerously cold paired with the president's stoic face, but with the glint in her eyes is even more dangerous. The secretary backed off, but surprisingly, the president answered the question, if a villain that has killed 65 people is not detained in Tartarus, there will be troublesome consequences. I don't have to tell you something so elementary. With that, the conversation ended and the secretary took his leave, scared for his imminent future. The president looked back at the city, already creating plans to use this incident to further her own goals. Izuku came back to himself in a cramped room. There was only a cheap painting and a bed in the room, not even a window, and gray-colored walls. There was only a single blanket on the bed, no pillows. Izuku had no idea why he was here. I was with Mom. Then everything came rushing back. The villain attack, Mom dying, and then Izuku finding out someone killed her on purpose, blacking out, and waking up to see everyone dead. Izuku curled up on the bed into a corner of the room. The green-haired boy was trembling, tears seeping out of his eyes, not stopping. His mom was gone. Izuku was like that for it seemed to be hours but might have only been a couple of minutes. Izuku's head shot up when he heard the door opening, clangs of bolts unlocking. There were 3 people, 2 men and a woman in a fancy suit. The boy, still trembling, observed the people, only noticing that the 2 men looked like bodyguards. No mutation quirks that Izuku could see, most likely emitters. He stopped his analysis when the woman came in front of him, still curled up into a ball. Do you know where you are? The freckled boy slowly shook his head, clearly gesturing he did not know where he was. The lady nodded and said, You are in the commission's headquarters. Izuku now was very alarmed. The people who ordered his mother to be killed has him. Izuku, impossibly curled up even more. I am the commission president and you, young man, have made things very troublesome. Do you know what I am talking about? Izuku, once again started to shake his head but then vividly remembered bodies laying limp and bleeding. Izuku paled. The lady, obviously seeing the change in behavior, stated, We have a theory on why all those people died. You, Midoriya Izuku, have an undeveloped mental quirk of untapped strength. When in enough stress, a child can use the full power of their quirk, instantly gaining more power. So, in a stressful situation, it is possible for a mental reading and communication quirk to overload all persons' minds in an area and kill them. I think you are a smart boy, Midoriya. You can guess how that played out. Izuku started trembling more, pale as a sheet. Izuku's eyes started to glaze over, struggling to compute what the president was saying. You killed all of them. You are a villain, Midoriya Izuku. Izuku, shocked by that statement, tried to immediately refute it, saying he would become a hero, but the president carried on without noticing or caring for Izuku's outburst. You may think we will give a child like you some leeway, but the commission does not take these events lightly, especially not me, and I am at the top of this organization. The president got closer to Izuku. The green-haired boy tried to inch back, but he was already at the wall. The president leaned into Izuku's ear and whispered, You don't want to fight back, or you will end up just like your mother. Izuku, shocked by this declaration, realized this woman knew that his mom was killed by the commission's hands. The president stood back up at her full height and turned around and walked back to the door. Izuku just curled up on the bed when he looked up and heard, Villains that are caught obviously are put away, and one dangerous villain like yourself must be put into the most impenetrable place suited for your kind, Tartarus. In that final tone and statement, the president left the room with her bodyguards faithfully behind her. The door shut with a clang, and Izuku broke down sobbing. The room was as big as Izuku's bedroom. With no window, Izuku had no way of telling what time it was. The green-haired boy had no way of knowing how long he had been there. At most 3 days. Izuku had only gotten 3 meals, and was currently very hungry. Izuku's stomach grumbled, clearly protesting the lack of food. Izuku had curled up for hours, crying his eyes out after the president left. After a suitable crying session, Izuku decided to explore the room, just for something to do to get his mind off of the circumstances facing him. The door was solid metal and cannot be opened from the inside. Smooth and impossible for the 8-year-old to escape from. The painting was bolted to the wall, nothing to see there. Izuku checked under the bed and nothing was there except that the bed was also bolted to the floor. Izuku also had a quirk suppressor on. He noticed a couple minutes after the president left. The suppressors was like a collar, not giving, and gave Izuku a shock when he tried to take it off. It was surprising that it took Izuku that long to realize his quirk was suppressed. There was no pain in his head but also no wandering thoughts of people by him. But he did feel something weird though. It felt like his mind changed from the stress reaction or from the quirk suppressors. Izuku did not know. Izuku itched to write something down in his notebooks, but that just brought the thoughts of his mom back. There were so many emotions in the freckled boy right now, Izuku couldn't even describe it. Sadness, dread, horror, disbelief, confusion, and so much anger. Sadness because his mom died, right in front of him. Dread, because he has no idea what is happening and doesn't know what is going to happen to him. Horror because the organization that heroes and the public rely on are nothing more than frauds. Disbelief because he was just named a villain and is going to be with other villains for maybe the rest of his life. Confused because why would the commission want to kill his mom for? She was the best person in the world. Everyone likes her. Angry because the commission took his mom away from him, cruelly, and with no regret. Izuku, with all these emotions, felt like he would explode. He just couldn't sit still. He paced the room with frantic energy, grasping at anything: his hair, his hands, his legs. He felt like he would pull his hair out if he found nothing else to do. He started to bite his nails, a habitat he never gained, but was desperate for anything to stave his mind off the situation. The young boy found that nothing worked. His mind was going 1,000 miles per hour and Izuku couldn't stop. He even wished for his quirk to come back so he could listen to people's thoughts, just to distract himself. When he released that nothing was working, Izuku tried a different angle. What can I do now? Izuku found nothing except to think. He can't escape, and even if he found a way to escape, the commission has resources and would probably find the boy in less than a week, and that is assuming Izuku can last on his own that long. Izuku remembered the news stories about kids on the street don't fare well, normally turning to villainy if ends don't meet. If Izuku stays here though, he will be shipped off to Tartarus. Izuku shivered. Izuku was a major fanboy of all heroes, so he knows where some of the worst villains end up. Tartarus is an inescapable prison that holds Japan's worst villains. Villains so vile that the commission never would allow them the light of day ever again. No one has ever been released from Tartarus because all the villains that are being held in that prison all have life sentences, or even the death penalty. Izuku was suitably terrified. Izuku knew that he would not last a second in that prison. He was a kid who could only throw a wimpy punch, never mind being in close contact with some of the most heartless killers in Japan. Killers. Izuku realized that he was on that list too now. Bile attempted to crawl up Izuku's throat but the boy swallowed it down. He doesn't have a bathroom here, so he doesn't want the smell of vomit in here, even if the thought of having killed people makes that hard. It hit Izuku, he killed people. Not just villains, but people who had families, who had mothers and fathers who had to find out someone killed them. They were probably feeling the same as Izuku, sad and lost without his mother to guide him. Izuku then threw up in the corner. He dry heaved when there was nothing else to throw up. Izuku wept. He cleaned up his mouth with his shirt, not the best thing he could have done, and got as far away from the vomit as possible. He collapsed in on himself, shaking with sobs and emotions he couldn't control. His mom was gone, taken from him. He killed people when he lost control of his quirk. He might not have seen it, but in his gut he knew it to be true. He killed all those people. Izuku just sobbed harder. It was practically a miracle that Izuku didn't collapse already. Emotions and half-finished thoughts racked Izuku's small body. I can't be a hero anymore. The green-haired boy just sobbed harder. He couldn't be a hero anymore. No one would want someone to have blood on his hands as a hero. He couldn't become a hero like All Might. He can't be with Katsuki, can't help with Kaken's dreams to become the #1 hero. Izuku will probably never be by Kaken's side again. Probably never see him or auntie and uncle either. For an undetermined amount of time, Izuku was overwhelmed and had to coach himself through panic attacks that wouldn't stop coming. Izuku was in shambles. Izuku finally stopped crying in time. The freckled boy had bloodshot eyes and was paler than a ghost. There were scratches on his arms and legs that dripped blood, where Izuku's hands unknowingly scratched himself with his nails. His shirt and briefs were in a crumpled disarray and Izuku looked like a complete mess. Izuku breathed in shakily and breathed out, and then repeated that as long as needed. Izuku put his hands on his head once. He was in the best state possible for the circumstances. Calm down, Izuku. Just think, don't panic, do what you can. Izuku was on the bed, in the corner under the blanket, like it could protect him. Don't think about how I got here, remember the facts. 1. The commission killed Mom. 2. I lost control. 3. People are dead, including the man who killed Mom. 4. The commission has me and is going to take me to Tartarus. Make a plan, something, anything to help. With those thoughts bouncing around in his head, Izuku took a deep breath in. The green-haired boy was always told that he was smart for his age, so Izuku would bring up all his smarts to help. Izuku thought, the commission was obviously corrupt. They wouldn't kill Mom if they were good. What? Does that mean a corrupt organization can control heroes? Does that mean they have done this before and no one knew? No, that is not possible. The organization is huge. Someone had to have known something. Or does that just mean the commission killed anyone that pressures them? Why did they kill Mom anyway? Maybe Mom found something they don't like. I'll just assume that. I can't do anything about the commission. I am a kid, a big kid, but a kid. No one will believe me even if I could escape. That brings me to the main issue right now. How am I going to survive Tartarus? I'm not powerful even with my quirk, and Kaken said I have wimpy noodly arms and can't throw a punch. Izuku had to calm himself down again, panic rushing up from his core. Hopelessness hit Izuku. He was just a kid, even if he was a smart one. A kid shouldn't have to worry about being killed in a prison. The green-haired boy hugged himself, a sad attempt at a real hug. The collar on his neck strengthened the feeling of hopelessness, a remainder of where he was. Izuku straightened, a question forming in his head. Why is he still here? Why did the president even bother with coming down here herself? Why is Izuku in this room and not in Tartarus already? Unless there was a reason. Izuku thought, obviously people will have heard there was a deadly villain attack that killed a lot of people, but I don't think the commission will share the information that the villain is 8 years old. Maybe they are not moving me because they can't. That thought made Izuku feel a little better, a solid idea that sounds logical. Izuku nodded in a confident manner to himself, a positive affirmation that he could still figure out the situation. Izuku was completely drained, moved to go to sleep. Izuku tucked himself in the most comfortable spot on the hard bed, squirming to find the most comfortable spot. It took a while to finally go to sleep, but the draining events of the past couple of days made it easier. Izuku fell into an unrestful sleep, tossing and turning, but finally fell into a deep sleep. The next couple days passed in the same manner. Instead of 1 meal a day, there were 2 meals a day. In the morning and at night, Izuku assumed the door would open to 3 people, 1 person with the food, the other 2 guarding the door to make sure Izuku couldn't escape. The people wore tactical gear Izuku saw on the TV, bulletproof vests and tasers, no guns. The food was honestly disgusting, gray lumps for food, but Izuku ate it anyway. He was given a substantial amount of water, a cup full for each meal. The green-haired boy drank the water with care, not spilling a single drop. Izuku tried to talk to them but the guards would just ignore him like he wasn't even there. After Izuku was finished, the guards left. Not everything was a waste. On the second day after the president visited, one of the guards accidentally touched Izuku. In only the second the guard touched him, the space in his mind was filled with sparks and lightning, and then it was gone. The guards left before they could see Izuku's shocked face. He instantly got to theorizing. What was that? Was that my quirk? I think it is, but that sparks never appeared before when I touched someone. Is this change for force developing my quirk? How did I even access my quirk with suppressors? Maybe the suppressors only work on my mind reaching out to other people? So it doesn't stop skin-on-skin contact because the commission doesn't know I can use it on skin contact. I don't know what changed, so I have to experiment, but I don't think I can hear without another person to experiment with. Izuku came to that conclusion after an hour of theorizing. The green-haired boy was overjoyed by the idea. He could access his quirk, but it would be dangerous for the commission to find out. Izuku double-checked his room for cameras. Izuku didn't find anything, but he couldn't be completely sure. Izuku was on the bed when the door opened. Izuku startled, hiding under the blanket, backing into the corner. It wasn't mealtime, so Izuku had no idea what was happening. The three guards came into the room and came towards Izuku and grabbed him by the arm. Izuku tried to shake his arm out of the hold, but the guard just tightened his hold. The guard guided him out of the room, arm in hand, and the other guards followed. The hall was gray like the walls in the room. There was nothing except for more paintings to give the hall more character. The guard led Izuku through twisting halls and finally ended in front of a door with the bathroom sign by it. While this was happening, Izuku focused on the sparks. His mind was filled with them, and Izuku noticed that these sparks came from the guard's head, strings of sparks connected. Izuku didn't know what would happen if he mentally jerked these spark strings, but before the thought fully formed, he was forcefully jerked into the bathroom. Izuku saw only a single toilet and a singular shower, with a sink on the side. The guard stated, the first time the freckled boy heard him speak, "Wash up. You have 5 minutes." With that, the guards left the bathroom, leaving Izuku alone. Izuku then noticed a change of clothes by the shower. Izuku was at least satisfied that he could take a shower. Izuku quickly STD out of his dirty clothes and jumped into the shower. There was only a bar of soap in the shower. Izuku showered quickly, not wanting to test the guard's patience, and changed into the new clothes. The new clothes were solid gray, shirt and breathes the same neutral color, and gray shoes. Izuku didn't like there were no other colors, but was glad to get out of the vomit-stained shirt and breathes. He looked around the bathroom to see if he missed anything. The 4 of the 5 minutes were up and the guards would enter soon. Izuku lifted up his shirt to spot his marks. He was conflicted. Would his family still want him? Nevertheless, Izuku had a gut feeling that he should never show the commission his marks. He didn't think his family would be safe then, even if Izuku would never meet them in this situation. The 5 minutes were up, and the guards opened the door. They didn't grab him again, but they made sure Izuku was in the middle of them. They walked for what seemed ages, took an elevator without anyone else in it, but one of the guards took out a card and swiped it for the door to open. There were no buttons, but the guards acted like it was normal. Izuku can tell that the elevator was going up for a PRD of time. The elevator opened up to a parking garage. Izuku could see multiple parked cars, but what got Izuku's attention the most was an armored van right in front of the elevator. The guards pushed Izuku, so he stumbled a little, because he wasn't moving into the direction of the armored van. Izuku could feel panic rise inside of him. Every step closer to the vehicle felt like one last step of freedom for the boy. The door opened and there was the president of the commission inside. Real bone-crushing fear appeared on Izuku's face after he saw the president. The guards shoved the boy inside the van, then got inside themselves. The next few moments were disorienting to Izuku. The guards hooked Izuku up to the restraints that were at the side of the van, then put a muzzle on Izuku's face. It cut into Izuku's face, already turning red where skin met metal. They sat him down, Izuku restrained and silent with the face covering. The president just looked at the scene and did nothing but watch him. Izuku got forced into position. 2 of the guards sat next to him, while the other guard got out and went to the front of the van to drive. Izuku heard the engine start, and felt the last of his meager up leave with the sound. He looked down, muzzle disrupting his vision, and felt absolutely terrible. The van left the garage, and Izuku saw the sun for over a week. The boy soaked in the sight, bright sunlight coming through the windshield showing the buildings outside the commission headquarters. The van started driving on a predetermined route, Izuku watching the surrounding pass by him, memorizing the route. It was quiet for a few minutes, Izuku watching the route, until the president spoke. This will be the last time you see the sun, so I suggest you remember this day. Izuku snapped his eyes to the president. The woman put together as always, face stoic, showing no emotion to the child she'd made to a life of misery, like it didn't affect her. The president looked at the young child and stated, "The public has come to know of a villain of A-rank capabilities has been recently arrested and is sentenced to have a life sentence in Tartarus for the murders of 65 people. No one will know that Midoriya Izuku is the villain. Do not think anyone will ask. Midoriya Izuku has been presumed dead since the villain attack and is not expected to be found." Izuku digested this information, dread sinking into his gut. No one will look for him, at least not where it matters. Izuku looked at the car floor, a myriad of emotions in his teary eyes. The president watched Izuku and seemed satisfied with the boy's reaction. The rest of the ride was Izuku forcibly silent, with handcuff restraints attached to his wrists and ankles. The collar was even more suffocating than normal. The muzzle on his face made it hard to breathe, and Izuku was trying not to cry. Not really achieving that because there were tear tracks below his eyes. The boy looked up because they were heading towards the docks of Mustafu. The van eventually stopped near a docked boat that had the commission symbol on it. The guards unlocked the ankle restraints but left the wrist ones on along with the muzzle. The guards ushered him out of the van and to the boat. The boat was big and looked kind of like a yacht, except less fancy. Izuku looked onto the boat and saw a small crew of 5 workers preparing to go out. Izuku remembered Tartarus was on an island 5 kilometers away from land. Izuku shivered in fear. The guards plus the president went onto the boat with Izuku shoved onto it. The crew saw Izuku, hesitated for a second until they saw the president and hurried back to their jobs. The crew looked more scared of the president to even ask why he was there in literal chains. Izuku felt another flicker of anger in him aimed at the president. Why can't she just do her job correctly? Izuku was led to the door of the boat, led down some stairs and saw a cell. A literal brig in a ship. He thought they were fake. He was pushed into the cell, chained up to the floor of the ship with more chains, locked and hopeless to escape. There was clang and a click, the door to the cell closed and locked. The last thing Izuku saw was the president's face. Izuku sat down in his cell, with the boat rocking in the waves. He could feel the waves that rocked the boat, consistently getting rougher the nearer they were to their destination. The young captive curled up into a corner of the metal cell, bracing against the rocking. Izuku couldn't even mumble to himself because of the muzzle on his face. All he felt was fear. He remembered what the TV called Tartarus, hell on earth, impossible to escape because of the security and more importantly, being surrounded by sea. Izuku was not having a good time. With the fear rising in him to a new crescendo, the guilt and sadness were coming too. Izuku desperately tried to stuff his emotions down, but they kept bubbling up. A fresh new wave of tears flowed from his eyes. Wondering why this was happening to him. With every question, his hate and fear of the commission grew. Hate because the president killed his mom and forced this treatment on him that was not right, even if he killed people. Fear because he will probably never leave Tartarus after he enters. Izuku was unable to compute his fears and he just started breaking down further. Izuku heard shouting up on deck and he felt the engines start to go slower. He was near. The boat eventually stopped, Izuku hearing the movement from above, until he heard footsteps coming down the steps. Izuku stood up, not really caring for getting pulled up from sitting position. The guards unlocked his chains from the floor, doing the same thing for getting out of the van earlier, wrists and muzzle restraints on. Izuku exited the cell and walked up the stairs. He saw the same crew members working and then he saw it, Tartarus. Izuku looked up at the forbidding structure with fear in his eyes. It was tall, very tall with gray walls with only one entrance connected to a bridge. He was staring at the structure for too long because the guard pushed him again. Izuku left the boat with the 3 guards, the president not in sight, probably left when they landed. Izuku walked in the middle again, flanked by the guards and was being led to the bridge entrance that was connected to the docks. There was no one in front of the huge steel door. The guards walked up to it and hit a button on the side. Tartarus was even more intimidating up close. All steel walls and no friendliness. Entry code. Izuku released the guard and hit the button, and it was apparently an intercom. C Delta 5546. Confirmed. With that, the huge door opened like the mouth of hell. Izuku entered and saw a huge entry area, then he saw the cells, hundreds of cells all clustered together. Fear pulsed through him when he saw the occupants. He recognized some of them from hero fights he used to watch. He looked around in terror. It was just rooms filled with villains as far as he could see until he could see the other side of Tartarus. He also spotted at least dozens of guards walking the cell, sometimes hitting or yelling into the rooms at the occupants. While he was staring, the guards led him to a room. The lead guard pushed him into the room, unlocked his wrists and ordered, "Change." With that, the door clanged. The room Izuku was pushed into was a bare room with a singular table, with a prison outfit as bland as the clothes he was wearing, with only one exception. Izuku picked up the shirt, and there, right above where his heart would be, right on top of his mark, was the number. Tsutsumi was having a horrible day. The other day the guards informed her that she was getting a new roommate. She always ends up with the difficult ones. Every single time when they found out she used to be a pro hero, they would attack her, because apparently all heroes are the same. She scoffed, like how she was pro hero. She was just a licensed hitman the commission used for their own goals, and she fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. She was sitting on her bed in her very own cell because everyone who roomed with her had to leave with at least a broken nose. Tartarus was hell on earth for anyone unfortunate enough to end up here, and even worse for someone who had a bad cellmate. Tsutsumi remembered one time last year where a poor son of a bitch got stabbed in the back by his roommate and the guards didn't catch wind of it until a few hours later. The perpetrator of the crime only got 3 weeks in solitary and then went back to his normal routine. While she was reminiscing, she heard the inmates around her cell start making a fair share of noise. She looked up and started going forward until someone was in front of her cell. She could easily see that there were 3 guards and one unlocked her cells and threw someone inside. They locked the cell again and she heard, "Welcome to Tartarus, prisoner 000666. With that they left. She looked down and didn't see a man but a child. A scared adolescent child, probably not over the age of 10. He looked up and saw her, muzzle on, but what stood out to her was his bright green eyes and hair and squishy cheek bound in that muzzle, the perfect picture of innocence. She rushed to the child and helped him up. The child was in the standard issue of prison grubs and cork suppressor collar. Then all Tsutsumi felt was rage. But she controlled herself and said in a gentle tone, because this was very much a child and did not belong here, "Hi little one, my name is Kana Tsutsumi, what yours?" Then she realized she was an idiot and helped the child get the muzzle off. Once the muzzle was off, she heard the most sad whispered voice she ever heard in her entire life. "Nice, Midoriyas Izuku." The child looked at her with fearful eyes and all Tsutsumi was thinking in her mind was, "What the F dash?" Katsuki never really gets scared. The only time that happens is when the scary movies are on. He doesn't like those movies. Katsuki is scared now though. He hears his mom's voice, talking to someone, but it is shaking, like she was about to cry. He was scared. Mom sounds scared and that scares him. He got downstairs and he saw his mom on the phone. He didn't quite hear what the people on the other side were saying, but Mom was crying. He also saw his dad on the couch with his head in his hands, also shaking with emotion. Mom hung up the phone and Katsuki asked with a subdued tone, "Hag?" With that his mom turned to him and ran towards him and hugged him. She was crying, Mom was crying. He asked, scared, "What happened?" His mom visibly composed himself and said, "Inko isn't coming over anymore." Katsuki was confused. "What about Izuku?" With that his mom broke down sobbing. Izuku looked at the lady. The lady was in prison clothes but she looked at him with worry. The guards just threw him in the cell with the lady. He looked up and saw her face. She looked familiar though, and he can't place where he's seen her though. She stood up when the guards left and locked the door. She came in front of him and he couldn't stop trembling. This lady is a villain even though she looks nice. The lady kneeled in front of him and said, "My name is Kana Tsutsumi. What's your name?" He looked at her, then the lady seemed to realize he was still muzzled. She helped him to take off the muzzle. Izuku couldn't help realizing that the lady was gentle when she helped him get the muzzle off. Once the muzzle was off, he could breathe again. He didn't realize how constricting it was until it came off his face. He was shaking but spoke, throat dry, Izuku Midoriya. She smiled a smile that looked cracked at its edges, eyes filled with undetermined emotions. She helped him to his feet and guided him to a bed. Izuku didn't have the time to look at his new environment till now. It was about the same size as the room he was kept in before, but this one had a bunk bed, a toilet and sink, with a heavier-duty metal door. It has gray walls too. There was a tiny window in the door though. While he was looking around, the lady situated herself on the bed too, sitting next to him but not in his space. They were both silent for a few moments. He looked at her again and she looked at him and said, "I won't ask why a kid like you is here, but it's got to be med bad. I doubt you would tell me anyway, but I will lay down the rules in Tartarus, a special gift from me." She looked at him more intently and Izuku nodded. She nodded to herself and stated, "There are multiple unspoken rules in here and it is very important to follow them, okay? For your safety and mine. 1. Don't trust anyone in here with your back. Everyone in here already has a life sentence. They don't care about a longer sentence. 2. Don't count on the guards. They don't care unless we try to escape, everything else is free game. They can't stop anything anyway. 3. Don't fight the guards. They won't do anything unless you attack them, and if you do, well, the guy a couple cells from us tried that, and he was in the infirmary for a year." Izuku could tell there were more rules, but he was positively terrified. The lady saw this and stopped. Her face changed into a slightly more soft expression. She sighed and brought her hand up to her blue and pink hair and dragged her fingers through it. She looked at him and stated softly, "I know I just told you to not trust anyone, but I can tell you this. You were lucky." Izuku looked up at her with a question in his eyes. She saw this and continued, "I only defend myself in this place. In fact, I like kids. So you don't have to worry about me hurting you, but everyone else is probably going to try to hurt you. If you were put into a different cell, well, just be glad you are with me. Got it? I won't hurt you." The young inmate looked into her eyes for any lies, and then started crying. The lady, startled, obviously not expecting the tears, looked awkward for a moment, then slowly came forward and gave him a hug. The hug was warm and Izuku, who spent a week without any positive touch, melted into the embrace. The lady awkwardly patted his back. It took a few moments for Izuku to stop crying. He backed off the hug and the lady let go too. The lady sighed and spoke, "You must have had a hard time. I don't want to teach you the inner workings of Tartarus, but you need to know." Izuku nodded his head and the lady sighed again. She shifted, trying to get comfortable on the uncomfortable bed. The truly dangerous villains are all placed in single-celled rooms. They never leave those rooms, so you don't have to worry about those villains, but normally only the S-rank villains are there. B-rank to C-rank villains are all in cells like this one. You never know because we all wear these orange uniforms. She gestured at herself, orange jumpsuit with her prisoner number above her heart. Izuku tilted his head, wondering why his uniform was gray. Tsutsumi noticed the look and said, "All new arrivals wear gray until specialized jumpsuits are made, a common procedure." Izuku nodded, made sense because there may be mutation quirks that don't fit the normal outfit. There are 3 meals every day brought to our cells. Showers are 3 times a week. Luckily for us, there are mandated shower times, so no one is there with another person. With that, Tsutsumi made a weird face. Izuku couldn't define the emotion on her face. It looks like something with disgust, dread, and relief when she said something about showers. Izuku had a feeling that the showers alone are important. Tsutsumi took a deep breath and exhaled and then continued, "I have 2 more things to tell you, but I think that can wait." Izuku went immediately to protest, but Tsutsumi stopped him with a gesture. "I bet you haven't got a good night's sleep. You look tired." "Real question." Tsutsumi smiled warmly at him, mischievous look in her eyes. "To bunk or bottom bunk?" Izuku, not expecting the question, startled, and then gestured up. She smiled and then gestured for him to go up. Izuku got up from sitting, unsure of himself, then climbed to the top bunk. He looked over to the side and looked at her. Go to bed, green bean, you'll need it. With that ominous statement, Izuku got under the cotton blanket, itchy and not that warm, and tried to get comfortable. Figuring out it was going to be uncomfortable no matter what, he just gave up. It took him a few moments, then he fell asleep, unexpectedly not worrying about Tsutsumi doing anything to him. She came off as kind to him, unexpected in Tartarus. The last thought he had before he fell asleep was, why is she in Tartarus? Kana sighed when she noticed Midoriyas finally go to sleep. She looked at his sleeping face, baby cheeks still present on his face that are covered in freckles, fluffy green hair framing his face. Feeling very creepy staring at his sleeping face, she sat back onto the bottom bed. She put her hand on her face, wondering what she is doing. When she was a hero, she always enjoyed visiting her young fans, but she quickly stopped visiting kids when her hands were beginning to be drenched in blood. What she did know was that she would protect the child. He is in her care now, and she did not trust anyone in this place to go soft on the kid. The guards will only see him as another prisoner. Kana looked at her left shoulder that was covered by her sleeves. On her shoulder was the tattoo with the number 656,698 permanently etched on her skin. The tattoo that every prisoner got in their first week in Tartarus, their number. She sighed again and looked down. The kid was going to get tattooed and nothing will stop it. It was informally known as the Mark of Tartarus, a cruel dig at soulmate marks. A mark that will never go away and symbolizes that whoever is marked will never leave this place. A fed-up tradition. That was one of the things she was going to tell the kid, but she stopped herself. She didn't think the kid would have a good night's sleep after she would tell what was normal in this place. She fell back onto her bed and stared at the bottom of the top bed. It was only afternoon and dinner wouldn't be here for another couple of hours. She needs to make a game plan. She never liked to see kids die, so she would do everything in her power to at least make sure Midoriyas didn't die that easily, because nothing is ever sure in this hellhole. What was her real question is how this kid even ended up here. She knows that the commission is corrupted as F, but not even she expected that the commission would go this low. She would have expected that if this kid had done something bad, they would use that excuse to take in the kid and train him in that program of theirs, the one where they trained kids to be their little puppets. If they didn't do that, that means that he did something that even the commission wouldn't have wanted to cover up where the kid came from. She moved onto her side and looked at the gray walls of her, cell, and thought that she would just ask the kid later. She closed her eyes, not to go to sleep, just resting her eyes, and thought, I need to teach the green bean to fight. Hey kid, wake up, dinner's here. Izuku whined, desperately trying to go back to sleep. He curled up, but the shaking woke him up. He opened his eyes and saw the lady, Tsutsumi, in front of him. He sat up, rubbing his eyes with his hand. He looked at her and she gestured for him to get out of the bed. He shimmied off the bed and climbed down the bunk bed. The food was in front of the door. He just noticed that there was space underneath the doors to open. The food was there and it did not look good. Tsutsumi went up to the food and grabbed both of the trays and held out one for him. He grabbed it and sat on the bed, feet off the side, not touching the floor. He ate silently, learning that food was precious, so he ate everything even if it wasn't good. Once he was finished, Tsutsumi grabbed his tray and piled it on top of hers. She finished eating before him and pushed the trays out of their cell. Once that was done, she sat back onto the bed next to him. The boy looked down at his feet, not wanting to break the silence. For a few moments they were silent until Tsutsumi stated, I told you there were 2 things to tell you before you took your nap. I will give it to you straight. You are getting tattooed. Izuku made a what? Face at her until she explained. All prisoners in Tartarus get their prisoner number tattooed onto their left shoulder in their first week of being here. See? With that she rolled up her long-sleeve prisoner garb and showed the tattoo with the number 656,698 on her left shoulder. She let down her sleeve and sighed. She seemed to do that a lot. I doubt they are going to break that tradition with you. It's not a really big thing in hindsight, but I wanted to warn you. It's kind of a sick joke the personnel here have in regards to the prisoners, but that's not important. She looked down at her hands, but Izuku was reeling. He never thought of getting a tattoo when he was older, but now, it just felt wrong to him in a way. Tsutsumi looked up again and looked at him. There was something in her eyes that made him feel that she had made a decision. She stood up and looked back at him and exclaimed, "I need to teach you how to fight." Izuku was startled, not expecting that. He always wanted to know how to fight because he wanted to be a hero without a combative quirk. His mom said that he didn't need to learn to fight until he was older because it would be 10 years before he applied to UA University. He didn't know how to feel about this development. Tsutsumi looked at him straight into his eyes and said, "In this prison, things work differently than other prisons." He looked at her with questions in his eyes. She continued, "I told you before that the guards didn't care about the prisoners unless they tried to escape, but what I didn't tell you about is that the guards like to spark flames between the prisoners here. They don't care if we die because we're already top-tier villains that don't deserve to live. People will try to fight you, maybe even try to kill you." The fear was rising in him again, and she saw this. She patted his head and proclaimed, "I will protect you. Most don't try to fight with me, they know better, but there will still be idiots. I'll teach you how to fight." "Good thing, I like to think I am a good teacher." Izuku calmed down again and looked at her with thankful eyes. She smiled at him, but he noticed the smile didn't reach her eyes. She continued, "Kid, you will have a bad time here. Everyone does, but the prisoners in here look at weakness and pounce on anything that shows fear. You're a kid and that makes you automatically weak to everyone here. Okay?" He hesitated but nodded anyway. She ruffled his hair and sat back down. "I am a tough teacher, but that's needed here, so don't give up on me, kiddo." He looked at her, and he thought that Tsutsumi had demons in her eyes, seen too much. "There is the last thing I have to tell you. It also ties into learning to fight." She looked at him and said, "Everyone in Tartarus fights. I told you that already, but what I didn't tell you was that there is something called the Inferno, a fight club, you can say, that the guards and Tartarus officials host every month. It is a free-for-all fight where the winner can have a single wish, not anything major, something like cigarettes or better food for a month until the next Inferno. That wouldn't be that bad, but there is a rule that an inmate has to fight at least once every year in an Inferno unless they are specifically not allowed out of their cell, like S-rank villains. The last Inferno in the year is in December, and that is always the biggest, the only Inferno that is not maxed out at 5 free-for-all fights per day. What I am saying is that you have to fight in that Inferno, unless you want to fight earlier. It is something akin to entertainment for the guards and inmates who don't have to fight. It is a hold no bars fight, only stopped when a person surrenders or knocked unconscious, even though the surrender is not detected sometimes. The next Inferno is in a couple weeks, but you'll not fight in that if I have anything to say about it." Izuku was digesting this information. He expected that he would have to fight at some point, but he didn't expect this. This is why she is going to teach him to fight. He can't dodge this. By this time, the numb feeling was coming back, paralyzing his body. Izuku opened his mouth and whispered, "Why do we need to fight?" She answered, probably ready for the question, "There have been studies forever about violence in video games." Izuku looked at her in confusion. She went on, "People who play violent video games are surprisingly less violent than other people. The theory is if people take out their violent tendencies on something else, they won't be violent later. It's the same kind of thing in this place. The Inferno takes away some of the violent tendencies of the inmates. It kind of feels like bullshit most of the time, but that is the reasoning in the minds of the officials in Tartarus. So, we are starting your training today." Izuku opened his mouth, but closed it when he realized it was necessary. He looked down at his chest, where his marks were, and filled himself with determination. He would survive with his whole being. He looked at Tsutsumi with fire in his eyes and spoke with strength. "When do I start?" It has been 3 days since Izuku was thrown into Tartarus. He already had a schedule for every day. Wake up and eat the bad food, maybe take a shower alone with Tsutsumi guarding the door. They have the same shower times, like most cellmates. Led back to their cell by the guards. Then Tsutsumi teaching him how to fight correctly for a couple hours until lunch. Then lunch came, and then he went back to training, but this time flexibility. Tsutsumi said that flexibility was important, it made him more agile. Izuku remembered Tsutsumi saying, "You're tiny with no big mass to help you punch someone's lights out. So that means that you can't get hit, so you have to be fast." The goal is to not get hit, but you have to hit back. But that also means you are a smaller target. Use that to your advantage. Get fast. She gave him a pat on the head and directed him how to stretch correctly. Then came dinner and they stopped to eat dinner. By this time, Izuku would feel tired and sleepy. Susumu would direct him to go to bed. No matter how much Izuku said, he felt like he could stay awake. Today felt different though. Tsutsumi was on edge, shifting where she sat on the bed. The feeling came to fruition when the cell door opened, with 2 guards at the entrance. Tsutsumi stood up and placed herself in front of Izuku. Izuku hides behind her, looking at the guards from behind her back. The guard in front of the other ordered, 000666, come with us. Tsutsumi stiffened in front of Izuku, and he felt fear. He didn't feel fear with Tsutsumi but knows that this is bad. He clutched onto Tsutsumi's clothes. She spoke with suspicion in her voice, "Why are you taking him?" Izuku couldn't see her face but he could tell her eyes narrowed at the guards. The guard smirks, eyes malicious. It's time for him to be marked, isn't it? The guard came in and grabbed Izuku from behind the older inmate. He was grabbed by the sleeve and was dragged out of the cell. The last thing he saw from the cell was worry in Tsutsumi's eyes. The guards were leading him to a place he hadn't seen yet. All he sees is gray steel walls, with cell doors on each side. He hears noises from the cells when he passes but can't pick out any words. They walked to an elevator, and Izuku saw cameras in it. He never really noticed before in his cell, but there were cameras everywhere in Tartarus. Every corner was filled with security cameras, and some weird barrels in the corners. He had a sinking feeling that those were guns. The elevator went down on its own, probably the security seeing the guards with him in the elevator. The elevator stopped after a minute of going down. The guards pushed him out of the elevator and they were in a small room. He looked and saw some doors leading someplace else. What he saw in the room is what looks like a dentist chair with straps on it. There was a person beside it. Izuku was pushed onto the chair and was promptly strapped in. The guards had no gentleness in their hands when his left sleeve was pulled up over his shoulder. Izuku then heard a conversation with the guards and the person beside him. "This is the new prisoner?" One guard nodded and then stated, "Prisoner 000666. Simple to tattoo, well, better get to it." With that, Izuku saw the man pick up a weird pen filled with ink. He wiped Izuku's shoulder with a wipe and then put the pen on his skin. Izuku felt like he was pricked with a needle multiple times, not really that painful but gave him a stinging sensation. His eyes pricked with tears when the man kept on going. He looked away and stared at the wall. After 30 minutes, the man stopped and put away the wired pen. Done. With that, the boy looked at his left shoulder and saw 000666, bold and permanent on his skin. The man put something like plastic wrap where it was. He was unstrapped from the chair and was led back from where he came. His shoulders stung on the way back. He could feel something oozing out from his skin where it was trapped in plastic. When he got back to his cell, Tsutsumi was ready for his arrival. The guard threw him at her and she caught him. "Don't let that get infected, hero." With that, the guards left, in all their uniformed glory. Izuku finally started crying. Tsutsumi immediately went to hug the crying boy, now used to his emotions. Once that passed, Izuku hiccuped, but asked, slightly confused when he thought of earlier when the guards came in, "Why did they call you a hero?" Izuku looked at the older inmate with confusion in his green eyes. She sighed and spoke with resignation in her voice, "Because I used to be a hero, then I did something that I shouldn't have, and then I was thrown in here. That's all there was to it." Izuku thought there was something else to her story, but he didn't like why he was here either, so Izuku thought that was fair. It got Izuku thinking though. A hero that did something bad and got arrested. He would remember something like that happening because he always looked up to heroes. It made sense though. Tsutsumi didn't seem like a villain. She was rather nice once you got past her hardened shell. She was much nicer than his teachers, rather, his old teachers at this point. Then it clicked, "You're Lady Nagant." Izuku remembered when Lady Nagant was arrested. It caused a lot of breaking news when it happened. A top 100 hero betrayed the other heroes by leaking info to villains. Yes, I am, but I should say that everything the commission said about my arrest was a cover-up. Izuku nodded, he thought so. That was that, and Tsutsumi didn't speak up more, so he dropped the issue. It was fair, he didn't want to talk about his arrest either. There was no training today. Tsutsumi told him he doesn't want the tattoo to get infected. He sat on his bed and was thinking. Before everything, he would have been ecstatic to be in the same room as a top 100 hero. He would be jumping off the walls. He would ask for their autograph and put it in his notebook. Now though, everything felt tense and uncomfortable. He realized now that with what he has seen, not everything in society was all right. His thoughts were interrupted when dinner came. They ate in silence and Tsutsumi told him to go to bed. He went without issue, not feeling like putting up a fight today. The blanket was uncomfortable as ever, but he went to sleep without issue. Kana sighed. She knew she would tell the kid that she was a hero. He took it better than she thought, but she could tell he was thinking about something. For that past couple of days she realized he wore his heart on his sleeve. Filled with innocence, but at times she saw a hidden darkness in him that was formed by trauma. She knows that the kid had to have done something to end up. The past couple of days training him also showed her his determination. He soaked up everything she showed him like a sponge. He had a natural talent for learning, especially fighting. She showed him how to punch, and every time she said something about what he did wrong, he fixed the issue. He normally never makes the same mistakes. He learns through experience. Of course he can't fight for sheet right now, but the future is there. It normally takes years to learn how to fight. It took her 15 years to earn her black belt, and that was fast in terms of years. Right now she is doing what she can to get the kid solid foundations. It might get him killed if he doesn't have a solid foundation. At least he is a flexible child. Kana remembers a hero she knew that only packed on muscles and never tried to be flexible. He got so many concussions from sparring with her. Kana looked at Midoriya and saw him dead asleep. He normally has nightmares in the night, but there is no nightmare in sight when she looks at him. She can tell that he is struggling. She was surprised to learn and maybe angry that he was only 8 years old. He told her on the second day he was here. She asked and he answered. An 8-year-old shouldn't even be in the vicinity of this place, never mind incarcerated here. The only thing that is probably keeping him from drowning in his emotions is to not think about his emotions and whatever he locked up in his head. He probably wanted a distraction, and learning to fight is the distraction. She sat on her bed with a thump and looked at her wall. It is so wrong for a kid to be here. She was glad that cellmates showered at the same time. If he was alone, she didn't want to think about it. She shook her head to shake those thoughts out of her head. He got tattooed today and she wanted to spare him that experience. When that happened to her, she felt like a cattle to a slaughter, a brand with the meaning of no escape. She didn't make peace with it but thought that there was no way to change it unless with laser treatment that she had no access to. Getting a tattoo of the inmate number is very uncommon in this day and age. Tartarus is the only prison that does it. She scowled. There were many things that happened in Tartarus that violated human rights. The inferno is case in point. She had precept in the inferno every year she has been here. She had to figure out the rules herself because no one in this hellhole wanted to converse with a hero. She won every time she entered an inferno. Granted, she has only been in 3, but that is impressive in itself without a quirk. She scoffed when she thought of it. Most of the villains incarcerated in Tartarus ended up here using their powerful quirks and couldn't fight for sheet without them, unless they had to learn how to fight to use their quirk, but that was a rarity. She was teaching him how to fight because he would be a lamb to the slaughter if she didn't teach him. He was small for his age and naive. The villains would pounce on him at first sight, and the bad thing is that it is normally during an inferno. She saw some inmates get killed during infernos. She didn't tell that piece of info because she could tell that the young prisoner was getting overwhelmed. She got up and went to the middle of her cell. She dropped and immediately started to do push-ups. She couldn't afford to get out of shape, especially after promising to look after the kid. Working out in this tiny cell gets boring after a while, but she does it anyway. There's nothing else to do anyway. She was thinking while doing push-ups. Kana was thinking that Izuku might never get an education. She will have to find a solution for that. An idea entered her head, but that would require fighting an inferno this month. She stopped doing push-ups after 100 and such to curl-ups. Up and down, crossed arms over her chest met her knees, then down, and then again 50 times. By the time 50 was over, she worked up a light sweat. She started to do squats. Her workout over and started to think that the kid should start working out soon too. A bit too early for a hard workout, but he needed to be fit to live here. She wiped her forehead to wipe off the sweat. She wished she had weights, but apparently they were a security risk. This would have to do. Kana never would have imagined that she would get this attached to a kid. There may be dire circumstances, but it is still surprising to her. Maybe it is because she is not afraid to help a child who has already spilled blood, and it won't matter that the blood on her hands would be added to his skin. The kid may not have opened up about what happened for him to end up here, but there is not a doubt in her mind the kid has blood on his hands, no matter how unwillingly it got there in the first place. He's a sweet kid, that is very certain in her mind. She went over to the green bean's bed and patted his green-haired head. The kid moved unconsciously into her touch, fluffy hair under her hand. She smiled at him and whispered, "I'll be even more dmed if you manage to die with me protecting you. Count on it." The first couple of weeks in Tartarus were surprisingly less stressful than Izuku had thought. Maybe because Tsutsumi was always with him when he went outside the shared cell. He would say that she was babying him, but her presence set Izuku at ease. When she was coaching him how to fight, she would always pay attention to him and what he was doing, and when he made a mistake she always pointed it out in a way where he felt like she was helping him and not making him feel like he was stupid like his old teachers. Those teachers didn't like his quirk because it was invasive. Tsutsumi was even a former hero. Izuku got a little bit more confident talking to her and asked some questions. Never about why she was here, but something like how she was such a good hero when she was active. The schedule for every day never really changes. Training every day and eating and taking a shower every other day. The young inmate thinks he has been getting better at fighting. He never has fought anyone though. Tsutsumi said that he is still too fresh with the concepts of fighting to fight against her in a practice match. Izuku is inclined to agree with her. She has experience fighting against real villains for years, and he only had a couple of weeks practicing how to throw a punch and where his feet were supposed to go. It was surprisingly more complicated than what was shown on TV. That's what Izuku was doing now. He had his left foot in front and his right leg back. His left arm up in a ready stance with his right hand in a fist. He remembered that Tsutsumi said when punching he had to hit the target with the space of his index finger to his middle finger knuckle. Lock his wrist, because if the wrist collapses the punch's power will be non-existent. He imagined a spot in the air as the target and practiced his punches. He switched his stance to the opposite every 10 punches. Back leg is supporting 60% of my body weight, slightly bent and at an angle to the outside of my body. Punch with the back hand, then back. Don't completely straighten the arm and keep it slightly bent at the elbow. Angle back foot to in front. Keep guard up. SWCH. Izuku repeated Tsutsumi's instructions in his head while punching the air. He did this normally every day unless Tsutsumi said to change it up to something else. She gave him lessons on how to kick too. They haven't done too much of that. She also showed him other stances for punches that could be used in different ways. He remembered she said something about that practicing one thing is good, but he should have other options. He practiced in the middle of the cell with Tsutsumi sitting on her bed. She normally did that after she was done with exercising for the day. The first time Izuku saw that habit, he was amazed. She was really strong. He would be exhausted after even a third of what she did, and she was slightly sweaty. That was the moment Izuku realized he was lucky with his cellmate. She called out to him if he made a mistake and then personally did the practice with him so he could see what it looked like. One time he saw her do a black belt level line drill for him, and he could tell how powerful her punches were by just seeing her move. Tsutsumi explained that a line drill is a set of movements that can be translated into a real fight. He hopes that he can do that soon too. She said that is unlikely, it took time to get to that level. Izuku pouted but realized that was true. If it was so easy, everyone would do it. She also taught him some joint locks. Those were fun in his opinion. He couldn't really do some of them because he was still short. Tsutsumi even called him a shorty one time. The boy then said he was still growing. After that, Tsutsumi had a weird expression on her face, but it was gone before he could determine what emotion was on her face. Overall, Tartarus wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. Although he was under no illusion that he was safe. He saw how some of the other inmates looked at him while Tsutsumi and him were directed to the shower area. It felt like being watched by a herd of predators. He felt all the malicious gazes, but he could also feel the gazes on his cellmate. The gazes were filled with hatred and loathing. Even with those intentions, she held her head high and didn't even react to the other prisoners. She looked like she was used to it. "You can stop now, kid. I have to talk to you about something." Izuku put his hands down and unclenched his fists. He looked at her and noticed that she had her hands clasped together. Izuku tilted his head in confusion. She only stopped him if she wanted to tell him something. She sighed and had a resigned expression on. She stood up and went to him. She put her hands on his shoulders and spoke with a conflicted voice. "Tomorrow is the March Inferno. I am going to fight in this inferno." Izuku was startled, not expecting that. Tsutsumi said she doesn't like fighting in the infernos, so he is surprised she was going to fight. She took her hands off his shoulders and sighed. "I need to win to gain something that is important. Don't worry about it. I have won every inferno in the 3 years I have been here. Don't worry, I can handle myself." Izuku was not filled with confidence. He shifted, eyes showing worry for her. She was kind to him, teaching how to survive in this place. Tsutsumi could never fill in the spot his mom was, but she was starting to fit into the role of a big sister for him. She was kind and protected him. "Are you sure you should?" Izuku's eyes looked at her with concern. She looked at him and patted his head. She ruffled his hair, angling his head down. "I know what I am doing, shorty. Infernos are dangerous for only the people who can't fight without their quirks." That got Izuku thinking. "Tsutsumi, why haven't you asked about my quirk?" Tsutsumi sighed. "Because you obviously have history with it. I don't want to bring back bad memories." Izuku started crying silently. His head was still angled down, but Tsutsumi saw his tears. She didn't say anything, just ruffled his hair more. With that, the young inmate went back to his training and the older inmate watched over him. Izuku was debating with himself if he could trust her. He went through the pros and cons and decided that it won't matter that much anyway. After dinner came and went and it was ready for Izuku to go to bed, the young boy spoke up. "My quirk is called mental capacity." Tsutsumi, not expecting Izuku to speak, looked at him with an unreadable expression. "I can read the thoughts of everyone in a certain range. I can also project my thoughts into other people." Tsutsumi came up to him and hugged him. "Thanks for telling me. Go to sleep, kid." He nodded and went to bed. He was out once his head hit the pillow. Kana looked at the kid's bed and went to do her exercise routine. While she was doing that, she thought about the boy's quirk. It didn't seem that powerful when she heard about it, but once she thought about it, she realized he could be very powerful when he grew up. If he was a hero, he could scope out villains' hideouts and find out about what was going on without even entering the building. Also, if he was a villain, he could find out state secrets by just being in the vicinity of certain people. What she didn't know why he was here. The only thing she could think of is that he heard something unfortunate, but something in her gut was saying that there was more to the story. She sighed and stood up. She wiped the sweat of her forehead with the back of her hand. She looked at the kid again and realized the kid was growing on her. She realized she was becoming more welcoming to the boy, and the boy obviously was starting to trust her. He told her about his quirk, and if that wasn't a sign of trust, she didn't know what was. She should probably give him more warnings about trusting people in this place, but she will let that go just this one time. The only thing she knew for certain is that whoever put him in Tartarus didn't want him to come out alive. She'd scared, a grimace on her face. The only people she hated more than the commission were people who hurt kids. When she got the missions from the commission that involved child abusers, she would feel slightly better those nights. She hated having blood on her hands, but those trash who dare say that they are human are the exception to the rule. Same with child RPSTs. Anything that involved a child being hurt, emotionally or physically, she slaughtered without mercy. That was probably a bad mindset to have, but who cares when the commission weaponized to do their dirty work? She had a bad feeling that some of the trash who she killed under the pretense they were child abusers had false accusations of that sort. But it was too late now. She looked up to the ceiling of the cell. The inferno she was precepting in is going to be a one-on-one fight. Better than the free-for-all fights that happen the majority of the year. She can take the majority of Tartarus in a face-to-face fight, but there are some that she does not want to fight. Those inmates normally only fight in the free-for-alls that are called circles. Circles are the fights where prisoners die. Doesn't happen often, but the population of Tartarus always goes down by at least 2 per circle. At least in a one-on-one fight, the guards will pull apart the fighters after a prisoner wins. Kana doesn't want the kid to see such violence. In any other situation she would shield him from the carnage that an inferno brought upon the prisoners, but she can't shield him from this. He is going to live, or should she say, survive here until something happens. He is going to see the violent actions that would scar a young mind such as his. It is inevitable that he himself will fight in the inferno as well. There is no use protecting him from it. It hurts her soul that she can't protect him from this. She realized what she was thinking about and scoffed to herself. When did she get so attached to the brat? Kana thinks about it and realized the beginning of her downfall was when the kid got hurt when trying to practice fighting. It happened the week after he came. He tripped and banged his head on the bed and started bleeding. She quickly patched him up with what she got. She realized later that she was slightly anxious about the kid's physical and mental state after that. She looked at the cell door with wary eyes. This inferno is a starting point for the kid. Good or bad? Izuku was scared for Tsutsumi. He knows that she will be fine, but it's the uncertainty of the situation that is getting to him. Once she told him she used to be a hero, he now realizes why the other prisoners hate her. He bets that some villains here have been captured by her. He knows that she won't go out without a fight and at least 5 knocked unconscious inmates. He just doesn't want to be left alone anymore, and if anything happened to her, his last string of hope, he wouldn't know what to do. Even with the short time they knew each other, she has become such a big part of his life. The young boy slowly came to realize that he probably would have died the first week in Tartarus if it wasn't for her. There are not many opportunities for other inmates to get close to each other, and those times it did happen and a prisoner came close to him, Tsutsumi was right next to him, protecting his back. He didn't realize how much she was protecting him until he heard a scream one day. It was a week ago, and all he heard was a blood-curdling scream and some squishy noises. He found out the next day that a prisoner died a few cells over by an inmate he passed a week prior to the incident. He had a particularly bad nightmare that night. It was the day of the first inferno he will come to witness. He was sitting on his top bunk, legs swinging over the side, and was watching Tsutsumi. She seemed to be closing her eyes and was breathing deeply and exhaling slowly. Even he could tell this was a way for her to keep calm. The green-haired boy looked at her with an unreadable expression in his bright green eyes. The blankets under him were more scratchy than usual when he fisted them in his hands. Izuku knew that the reason she was fighting was for him. She never told him that, but he was a smart kid and figured it out himself. She was completing something for a while before she told him she was going to precipitate in this month's inferno. He knows she can take care of herself, but he doesn't like that she has to fight battles for him. It makes him feel useless and not helpful at all. He bit his lip roughly, not drawing blood, but close. He started to tear up, but wiped the beginning of tears away. She didn't need to see him like this when she was preparing for the inferno. When she told him how the inferno works, he was surprised, and was mildly questioning why the heck this system was even set up this way. The inferno was set up in the middle of Tartarus. It was a caged fighting ring. Barbed wire around the bars so no one can climb up the bars. It was also apparently electrified too, with what Tsutsumi told him. The surprising part was that all cells can move to the center. The cells and the makeup of Tartarus can change places with other cells. Apparently it was a measure so no one can escape because the map of Tartarus always changes. He felt this change sometimes during the night while he sleeps. This allows the cells to move to the inferno so all inmates can watch the fights. Of course, the small window is not a viewing experience, so there are small caged bars that fit perfectly for the door and the inmates are let out. The prisoners can't escape because the only door in those cages are the doors leading to the cells and one to the outside, so an inmate can walk out and participate in the inferno. Literally no escape. Izuku has no idea on how the cells move, but he thinks there is a mechanism in the cell wall that moves. Tsutsumi also told him what happens during an inferno. Normally it is just one-on-one fights, but sometimes there is a free-for-all fight. There are more than 2,000 inmates in Tartarus. It would be hard to have 1,000+ fights a year in only 12 infernos. Those free-for-all fights have at least 50 participants. Izuku never wants to be in that situation. He was trembling just thinking about it. Sure, he had a month of fighting training, but that would not help him when a grown human attempted to beat him up. Maybe he would get lucky and get a hit in, but after that is just him getting beat up. Tsutsumi told him that he shouldn't give up. He won't, but it is pretty disheartening. He doesn't want to be protected forever. Izuku wants to have his head held high and not be intimidated by anyone in here. That is probably an impossible dream, but he will work towards it. He would not give up. She also told him that she will be fine this inferno. There is information that is given out to the inmates in the middle of the month that tells what type of fights are in the inferno. She found out there are no circles in this inferno, so she would be fine. He is still worried though. He put his hand on his stomach, getting the simple comfort of where his marks were. Tsutsumi saw his marks once and was surprised. Tsutsumi quickly pulled his shirt down when she saw his soul family mark. He remembers what she told him that day. Never let these people see your marks. It is a sign of weakness here. The prisoners will purposefully scar your mark, so don't show anything. Got it? He nodded but was scared in a different way. He realized a couple of days before her platonic mark had a scar through it and had just realized it was with malicious intentions. He was glad he did not let anyone see his marks when he was brought here. He also noticed on his mark there was a filled-in gray line that turned gold. He was happy when that happened. It showed his family was still out there, waiting for him. Then he thinks that he will probably never meet any of them and then became depressed. He is in Tartarus, and he is pretty sure that no one in here will be his family. Hopefully. The only person he might think that could be in his family is Tsutsumi, but he has seen her bare stomach when she lifted her shirt to wipe off sweat when she finished exercising. That doesn't matter to him anyway. She helps him all the same even if they aren't family. He brought up his legs and hugged his legs to his body. Luckily he has 9 months before he is required to fight. By that time he can probably defend himself at least from one person, but it will become Ife if another person attacks him too. There was a jolt, and then Izuku felt movement from the cell moving. It wasn't really a smooth movement and it felt as if he was on a boat. He looked up and saw the older inmate look at the door with a determined expression. It only took about a minute for the cell to stop, and he started to hear jeers and shouts outside their cell. The door unlocked and Tsutsumi stepped out of the door. He got down from the bunk bed and cautiously started to the door. He hid himself by the wall and looked out with only his head out from the door. He saw the caged cell that is connected to the door and saw the caged space was only a 5 by 2 feet area, barely any space, with a heavily locked door that looked extra enforced. Tsutsumi was already standing in the cage. That is when he looked around. He saw at least hundreds of cells with villains already in their caged bar. Cells and looking at a specific area. He looked there and there were 4 fighting rings. One of the 4 was gigantic, at least 100 by 100 feet area. The other 3 looked like something out of the boxing matches he sometimes sees on the commercials at home. The villains he could see were shouting and some just sat back and watched. This was the first time he really saw any villains here in large numbers. Every villain he saw had a neck quirk suppressor, but some had extra restraints. He guesses those villains had some sort of strength enhancer. He also saw some mutant quirks here. He guesses that in a fight a mutant quirk is preferred. Everyone he sees is wearing the orange prison garb. He is also wearing the same thing sized for him. The prisoner number is on the right of his chest, right on top of his romantic mark. The size of this place is boggling his mind. He looks around some more and wonders how the makers of Tartarus got the money to do this. The shouts are getting louder from the inmates. He hides in his cell a bit more, still looking out. Tsutsumi looks back at him and motions for him to get out. He walks unsteadily to her and hides behind her. After that he heard the door clang behind him. He looked back and their cell door was closed. He looked back at his cellmate and explained, "Every prisoner is supposed to come watch this madness. The only exception is S-rank villains and prisoners in solitary." He nodded at her, showing her he understood. He observed the area and realized that there were guards everywhere. It looked that at least half of the total guards in Tartarus were here. He sat on the solid concrete ground and looked around. Tsutsumi leaned back on the bars and observed the entire place. He was sitting for about 2 minutes when he heard, "The inferno starts in 5 minutes." That was it. The announcer sounded like a computer-automated response. With that announcement, the noise from the other prisoners became louder. He scooted back to the wall and set his back against it, still sitting on the ground. He felt a hand on his head and looked up. He saw Tsutsumi looking at him and patted his head saying it was all right. He didn't even realize he was trembling until she calmed him down. He breathed in deeply and exhaled. He will be all right. He won't be fighting anyway. They sat and stood there for 5 minutes until he saw a guard come out and entered the huge ring. The guard was messing with something and then he heard, "Attention, all who wish to enter the inferno, press the button on the cells." Tsutsumi started walking to the front of the caged cell and pressed something by the locked door. He also saw some of the other prisoners do the exact same thing. The guard in the center of the ring nodded and exited the ring. The first fight is prisoner 567,839 against prisoner 348679. With that, 2 doors opened and only 1 person left from both cells. The 2 prisoners were both male, one had a mutant quirk that looked like rock hands. The other looked like a 20-year-old man with no distinguishing features. The 2 entered a small ring and the guards kept them from running. They both were at opposite ends of the ring, seemingly waiting for a signal. Start. With that the 2 prisoners went after one another with untamed ferocity. He would have guessed that the mutant quirk user had the upper hand until he saw that the other prisoner was playing with him. He dodged and weaved with ease. This went on for half a minute until the dodging prisoner no longer dodged. That prisoner threw a punch at the mutant quirk man's face. The mutant quirk user moved his head back, but that punch was a feint, and the man kicked his knees. Izuku realized what happened when he saw that the mutant clutched at his knee that looked wrong. He broke his knee. The man came up and threw another punch, but this one connected, hitting the other straight in the face. After that, it was just a beating for a solid 10 seconds until the guard stopped the fight because the other man was not moving. The man who won raised his bloody fists, and the cheering started. "King! King! King!" Izuku looked at Tsutsumi and she locked eyes with him and clarified. Prisoner 348679, or King, is the reigning champion of the Infernos. He enters every Inferno and wins every single time he has entered. You don't want to face him. He nodded and looked at King. He looked ordinary, someone you would see on the street and not think anything was different about him. Izuku shivered. How many villains have passed him and he didn't realize it? Izuku shook his head, it didn't matter anymore. He tilted his head when King left the ring and asked Tsutsumi a question, "Why is he here anyway? I would recognize most villains but I have never seen him on the news." She looked at him and looked back at the ring and stated, "He was a C-rank villain. He was never a big-shot villain, even though he had a long streak of kills a couple years ago. The reason he was placed low on the danger scale was because his quirk wasn't combat-related. He got that danger level from just his martial arts skill." Izuku looked at King. He realized in his time in Tartarus that quirks are the main decider on if a villain was dangerous or not. Sure, there are some other reasons that villains would get a higher rank of danger, but it is mostly the quirk's inherent destructive capabilities or kill capacity. It is actually surprising that a person could get a C-rank rating with only martial artist skill. He decided he never wants to fight King. He nodded to himself, mind made up. Look at him when he fights. Tsutsumi said that while looking at King. The young inmate looked at her questioningly and tilted his head in confusion. Look at the way he plants his feet, where he puts his hands. What his posture is and center of gravity. Don't look away. He's the best fighter here. Learn from his example. Izuku hesitated then nodded. He looked back at King and he was entering his cell. He heard a clang and the bars came back to close. Tsutsumi said to him once while he was practicing, and she clarified something. That having a good example is necessary to get stronger. To literally see what a human body can do. He had Tsutsumi, but she explained to him that she is a good fighter and will not lose, but she is not the best out there. He guesses that the example she wants him to study is king. After that there were multiple fights between two people. Tsutsumi told him to observe the fights, but even he can see that only some prisoners knew how to throw a proper punch. It was normally just a brawl between two people. The prisoners didn't care though. Every time there was blood flowing, the inmates started to cheer louder. The pounding of cell bars and shouts of encouragement from the inmates steadily grew louder the longer the inferno lasted. The louder the inmates got, the more Izuku curled up around himself. It was when he curled up on himself when the current fight ended. One prisoner was on the ground with blood pouring out of his head, dripping onto the ground of the fighting ring. The other sported a bruise on his neck and cheek. He saw the standing prisoner spit something out of his mouth. It landed on the downed inmate. That prisoner walked off while the announcer announced his win. Prisoner 345976 and prisoner 656698. With that announcement, their cell door opened and his cellmate walked out. Be careful. Izuku said that with tears in his eyes, and Tsutsumi looked back at him and nodded. She walked out of the cell. And the door closed. She walked to the ring, but Izuku heard jeers and expletives thrown Tsutsumi's way. Kill that beach. Die hero scum. Beat her up. Many more curses were thrown her way. He looked around and all he saw was hate and disdain on the prisoners' faces. He knew that she was disliked here, but not to this amount. The other prisoner was a man with a scar on his nose and a hateful expression on his face. Both prisoners entered the ring and stood at opposite corners. Start. The fight began and both prisoners rushed into the middle. Tsutsume was going at her own pace, but the other prisoner came at her with nothing held back. The man threw a punch at her face. She blocked it with her forearm and surprisingly got his arm into a joint lock easily. She blocked the punch with her forearm and twisted her arm under his elbow and reached back to his shoulder into a perfect joint lock. When his shoulder was stuck, Tsutsume put her foot inside his thighs and pulled his feet out from under him. He went down hard. She pressed down on him so he couldn't get up. He tried to free himself, but he was stuck. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He smiled at his cellmate, happy she didn't get hurt. It was Tsutsumi's win, but the other prisoners seemed to not like her win. They jeered at her even more. She just like it had nothing to do with her. She exited the ring and walked back to him. The door opened and she came back to him. His eyes were practically sparkling when she came back. All he could think was that she was really cool. The president of the commission was in her office. She was sorting through some paperwork that came after the Mustafa massacre happened. That incident was on the news for a good 3 weeks after. 65 people killed by one villain and one casualty from the gang violence was uncommon even in the time of villains. The entire city was in mourning. The vigils and offerings for the victims and the victims' families were so large they blocked multiple streets. Even though most of those families were of low-level villains. The only good that came out of it was that the villain was captured securely. Of course, the only people who knew that the villain was an 8-year-old boy have been silenced in one way or another. She flipped through the papers and documents with an unreadable gaze. She looked up with her aged eyes and spotted a report from Tartarus. She reached for it and opened the folder. The report stated that one Midoriya Izuku has settled in at Tartarus and has not made any attempts to undermine the guards. She read through the report and stopped at a section. Midoriya Izuku's cellmate happened to be one Tsutsumi Kana. The president hummed. That was one big coincidence. Cellmates in Tartarus are randomized so not even the guards know which prisoner would go where. One thing for certain is that the traitor Lady Nagant would not allow a child to die on her sight. Even though she has killed multiple villains and conspirators, she would not harm a child. It was a surprising day when she killed the previous commission president in this very office, but it should have been obvious that she would snap at some point. Lady Nagant had been reported having night terrors and signed up for therapy sessions before snapping. According to reports, she always seemed to be drifting off during missions and being distracted. Also, she had also been seen saving some low-leveled thugs when a building collapsed. She smiled less and had dead eyes when talking to commission-sanctioned heroes. The only person she was seen happy with was when she took care of the future commission hero, the trainee Hawks. She seemed to enjoy being in the presence of the child. Even gave him some lessons in martial arts. Hawks also grew attached to Nagant, calling her senpai, even though she was just a passing acquaintance. When she killed the previous president and was detained in Tartarus, Hawks was depressed for a good amount of time. After that, Hawks was barred from any interactions that didn't have any progress with his training. Going back to Midoriya Izuku, he was lucky he was placed in her cell. The president really cared for where the child ended up, only deciding that he wouldn't last in Tartarus and would be killed before he turned 10. Maybe he would even make it to his teenage years with Nagant helping him. No matter, he would die before he turned 18 anyway. With that thought, she pressed a button under the desk that buzzed for about 2 seconds. In a minute her secretary knocked on her door. "Come in." The secretary opened the door and walked into her office. He bowed respectively and asked, "What have you called me for, MDM President?" She looked at him and went back to her neglected documents and picked up a certain document. She looked it over and signed it at the bottom. "I want you to send this document to the officials in Tartarus. Make sure to not let this fall into the wrong hands." He nodded and came forward to get the document. When he had it in his grasp, he bowed again and left the room. The president went back to her papers and started working again. The Mustafa villain will not grace this city again if she has any say in it. This society does not need a weakling who has the potential to be troublesome for her. He needs to be disposed of one way or another. It does not matter when, he will die before he can reach 16 years of age. Of course at 15, a teenager can be tried as an adult and no one will have any sympathy for a villain who brutally murdered 65 people in cold blood. The situation with that he is 8 years old notwithstanding, even she does not have the power to silence a prisoner in Tartarus, but she can give out sentences without any interference. People may call her the judge, jury, and executioner, but with this power she can make society better. All Might is the shining jewel of this country and the other dealings will not diminish that shine. All heroes should lead by All Might's example and not sully Japan's reputation. All their faults will be hidden and thrown away into the shadows of the commission, never to be seen by the light of day. She has to do the dirty work other, weaker humans cannot, to make sure that this society will stay strong. She will allow no one to disturb this peace. She still remembers the time before All Might. Villains ran rampant and people could not live without fear. She was an adult when All Might came onto the scene. She recalls the way he demolished the villain organizations with ease and brought this peace to Japan. He is truly the symbol of peace. It would only be disrespectful if his work would be for nothing. She will make sure of it. There is only space for perfection in this era, no pity for a blood-stained child with no future. She sorted through her documents and remembered the one she just sent to Tartarus. No one can know that a child was sent to Tartarus. Even though that child killed dozens of people, the citizens would raise a fuss about how inhumane the sentencing is. All the guards are legally binded to a document that doesn't allow them to speak of anything they see in there, even to their families. Even with that, she is not confident she can keep the child a secret for more than 7 years, so she thought back to the document she just sent. Prisoner 000666 sentenced for the death sentence when prisoner turns 15. Signed, the President of the Hero Public Safety Commission. After all, the only way to leave Tartarus was in a body. But it was his birthday. Today was July 15th and he has been imprisoned in Tartarus for 4.5 months. It seemed like such a short time but also felt extremely long. He has watched 4 infernos with Tsutsumi fighting every time. Her prize for all of them was to get good food for Izuku. She didn't even get anything for herself. It was all for him. He felt bad but knows that if he ever said that he didn't want to be a burden, she would just ignore his opinion. Every time she does something like that, it makes something in his core twitch. Ever since his mother died, he noticed he changed. There was a part of him that broke and shattered. He felt that some of his emotions were muted. He knew that before the incident, he was an emotional child. When he was happy, he smiled like the sun. When he was sad, he cried his heart out. When he was angry, he was like a volcano. His emotions always took the extreme, but after the incident he felt like that wasn't the way he processed emotions anymore. He bottled up everything and only the most extreme emotions came through, and even then he wouldn't react like he would have done before. If the Izuku a couple of months ago were in his place, he would be crying nonstop. Past Izuku would have not moved unless it was for food or going to the bathroom. But now he would not cry unless he saw someone get assaulted in the inferno. Sometimes he cried at night, but that was it. He still felt happy, but his smiles never reached his eyes anymore. He knew that something was wrong with him and didn't know what to do. Case in point. Today is his birthday and he would normally be bouncing off the walls out of excitement, but now all he did was wake up and does his morning fight training. Maybe it's because his mom wasn't here to wake him up and give him all the love she had. With that thought, it just made Izuku sadder. He felt like he was underwater, everything just a bit more numb than usual. He doesn't like it. He felt like was drowning under everything. His mom is never coming back. He was imprisoned in a deadly prison. He would most likely never see the sun again. No one would know what happened to him and probably never cared anyway for a child they didn't know. He was drowning. Completely drowning under the weight of existence of one Midoriya Izuku. Something was rising in his chest. Everything just seemed to close into him, the walls getting closer, the dry prison air stifling. His heart pounding in his ears, pressure in his chest. His breathing was laboured, but his lungs never seemed to get enough air. His legs were shaky and felt heavy, and he felt like he would collapse. His hands were shaking and twitched, no strength in his adolescent hands. If anything happened to him right now, he would collapse like a house of cards. Izuku! He heard his name, even though he felt like he was in syrup and every sound sounded distant, far away. Izuku, what are 5 things you can see? The boy looked at Tsutsumi, who looked kind of panicked, but he didn't know why. He felt like he should listen to her though. The wall. Tsutsumi nodded and he continued, the bed, the sink, the ground. Great for things feel. She came closer to him and he automatically latched onto her. My sea clothes, your hand, the ground. 3 things you hear. A air conditioner, your voice, the sink. 2 things you smell. B breakfast, the toilet. She grimaced at that but moved on. 1 thing you taste. My saliva. She nodded and looked drained for some reason. He didn't realize it before, but everything felt clearer now. He could breathe again and everything felt a bit lighter. He didn't feel okay, but he wasn't like how he was before. Actually, he felt drained too, like he didn't get a good night's sleep. That was a panic attack. He looked at her questionably. It happens to a lot of people in certain emotional states, or when someone triggers them. Looking at you right now, this is the first time it has happened to you, right? He nodded. She sighed and said, I want to ask, but I think you should go to sleep. He sat up, instantly going to say that he wasn't tired, but she interrupted that train of thought. Panic attacks are draining in the emotional sense. Go to sleep, kid. He was going to fight her on this, but the look on her face clearly showed what she thought of the matter. He climbed up to his bed and curled under his blanket. The only thought he had before he went to sleep was that Tsutsumi called him Izuku. Kana put her head in her hands. She knew that the kid was hurting, it was plain to see. The way he reacts to some things like loud noises, or something simple like a head pat. She never brought it up because you just don't ask about someone's trauma willy-nilly. If Kana asked, either the kid would tell her or clam up. She was going to ask once he was more comfortable with her and could clearly trust her. Kana was just waiting for the right moment. Frankly, Kana was surprised it took this long for the young inmate to break down. She has seen hardened criminals have a mental breakdown a month into Tartarus. Granted, she was shielding him from the true atrocities of Tartarus. He was still a child and doesn't belong in this place. It is no place for a young boy. Kana supposes she should ask the child what happened today. She noticed that he was more down than normal, but she couldn't think of anything that would set him off. Maybe he just had everything rush him at once. Hell, she knows what it feels like when everything comes crashing down. She has to be careful though. She will never treat Midoriya like glass, but Kana wants him to be as healthy as he can be. That is why she fights every month, to make sure he is eating well for a growing boy. Sure, Every fight was easy, but there might be a day where she goes up against someone she can't beat. She just has to be patient, no rushing. The kid will probably need protection for at least 5-6 years until he can look after himself, and she will be by his side the entire time. All she has to do is be patient. The kid woke up after 3 hours. He sat up and rubbed his eyes, still sleepy but better than what he looked like this morning. Kana looked at him and sighed internally, indecision in her chest but not showing on her face. You know, we have to talk about what happened, right? No intention to overwhelm you or anything, but I want to help. Let me help. She said this while looking straight into the kid's eyes, hoping to show her sincerity with her eyes. He held his knees to his chest while still sitting on his bed and put his head in his thighs. Sensing that nothing she could say would be appreciated, Kana sat on her bed and gave the young inmate time. Over the next couple of minutes there was silence in the cell until the kid spoke up. "Today's my birthday." That surprised Kana. She would have thought the kid would have told her when his birthday was. Every kid is excited for their birthday. She would have guessed that this child would be bouncing off the walls with joy on his big day. Then she remembered where they were. Tartarus was not a happy place, but she still would have thought the kid would have mentioned something. She waited for the kid to speak again, not willing to interrupt the child. After a few moments, the child spoke again. "My mom would have made me a cake and given me presents. I would have been with Kakin and my aunt and uncle at the park. But I will never see my mom again. I realize this, but I just want my mom back." That, Kana heard sniffling from the kid and she stood up. Kana realized that Midoriya most likely doesn't have any parents, because what parent in their right mind allows a child to be placed in prison? She just didn't realize how much this was hurting the little prisoner. She climbed up the bunk bed ladder and sat next to the kid. She pushed Midoriya slightly onto her to cry on. He took that gesture with gusto because the next thing she knew was that she had an armful of crying child. He hugged her with everything those stick arms had and she hugged him back. Common sense, really. They stayed like that for at least 10 minutes until Midoriya spoke again with an anguished voice. "Mom picked me up from school. I was really excited because Mom told me she didn't have work for a couple days so we could be together longer. Then there was a villain attack. There were so many and Mom picked me up and ran. I heard a loud bang and my mom was bleeding a lot. I didn't know what was happening. That took a bit to ingest." Kana had a feeling that there was more to the story, but she got the gist in what happened. Villain attack and a deadly casualty, but that doesn't answer her question in why the child was here. "She died. I saw her die. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that something was wrong. Then I heard something with my quirk. I can't control it that well, and when I lost control during the villain attack, I heard something. My mom was killed on purpose. I heard the shooter think about how the commission gave him a lot of money for killing my mom. I completely lost control of my quirk. When I woke up, everyone was dead." After Midoriya finished, he went back to sniffling into Kana's shoulder. Everything clicked for the older prisoner. The commission was behind all of it. If investigators looked closely, they would have released that the commission had their hands all of that and probably would have questioned them. The commission, obviously not wanting that to happen, took the only witness and imprisoned him. This reinforced the notion that she hates her previous organization. Kana never really realized how corrupt the institution was when she was hired right after high school. Now she knows better. They would really kill an innocent to probably hide something. She hugged the kid a bit tighter, trying to give him something to ground him. It made sense why he had a panic attack this morning. Everything just caught up to him in the worst way, and everything was too much for the kid. She never wants the kid to feel like that. Kana knows that this environment is the exact opposite of a place where healing is done, but both of them can't escape this place. She can do everything she can, not much in hindsight, but enough to help. She patted the green curls and the child hugged her even tighter. "Hey kid, call me Kana." The head popped up from where it was and looked at her with a hopeful gaze. There were also some more emotions in those eyes, but she couldn't determine them. "Can I call you Kenshin?" The big green hopeful eyes, and she sighed a bit dramatically and said, "Yes, you can." The kid was obviously happy that the nickname was accepted and said, "Call me Izuku." "Got it, Izuku." It was the last month of the year, December. Izuku was currently panicking, although quietly. Today was the last inferno of the year and he had to participate this time. It has been 9 months since he was incarcerated in Tartarus and have seen 9 infernos with Kenshin participating every time. The young boy has seen her take down and win all her matches, but it doesn't stop the fear that she would be hurt every time she steps into that ring. It doesn't help that Kenshin gets hurt every so often in the matches. The worst injury was just a black eye, but it doesn't stop him from worrying. The food she gets for winning every single month goes to him. Apparently, since he is a growing boy, he needs better food. He finds this makes him feel worse about it. If it wasn't for him, Kenshin wouldn't have to worry about fighting every month and live with lower risk. Izuku doesn't like that she risks herself for his sake. The food doesn't even taste good. It's basically a side of steamed vegetables and cheap meat that has been half-heartedly cooked. Barely passable for a meal, better than the mush he normally eats. The last inferno of the year is here. He has to fight today. He is afraid. Sure, he has been training to fight for this day, but he has only been learning to fight for a year. Apparently he is making good progress because he trains every day, and normally a person only trains 2 hours a week for martial arts. So technically he is better at fighting than a person who has trained for years because he just has more time to. It is not like he has anything else to do. And it helps him keep his mind off of things. Like how the inmate next to his and Kenshin's cell was killed a couple days ago by the guards. Or how the last inferno caused at least 5 deaths because of free-for-all fight. Or how Kenshin was almost stabbed by another inmate when she was guarding the door to the showers, with him in it. Also from the homemade dagger he has in his breeds now because Kenshin gave it to him for protection. He can't use it in an actual inferno thought because it is cheating. Izuku generally isn't feeling that good nowadays. He hasn't really had more panic attacks though from what Kenshin has told him. She helps with that, just by being around her helps. She grounds him in a way his mom used to do, but in a different way. His mom used to feel like the warm rays of the sun, relaxing and safe for him, like a kotatsu. Kenshin feels like a cat, never cornered but safe to touch and relax with. Kenshin will never be able to replace his mom, no one can, but she has become important to Izuku. That day when he had his first panic attack, she fully gained his trust. No one is that good of an actor. The concern in her eyes was real. That was why the boy asked to use a nickname. Only the people he trusts gets a nickname. Only Kaken was able to get the trust to get a nickname until Kenshin came along. A buzz interrupted his musings. He sat on his bed, mentally preparing for his fight ahead, generally failing at that endeavor. He looked at Kenshin and she noticed. The purple and pink-haired woman nodded to him, and he got down from his bed. The prisoner garb started to feel itchy, but he knew that was only his brain playing tricks with him. The walls started to creak and groan, the normal sounds of when the cells started to move. Both inmates in the cell were silent, the atmosphere tense. "Kid." Izuku looked at his cellmate, silent and not saying anything in this atmosphere. "Remember what I taught you?" He nodded, green curls bouncing with the movement. She has taught him many things during his imprisonment in Tartarus. How to survive, who to avoid. Generally how not to die. Granted, he hasn't used that many of the things she taught him, but he has a feeling he will use some today. There was worry and a smidge of fear in her eyes when she talked to him. He thinks that makes sense. He worries about Kenshin every time she enters the ring. Why not her worrying about him? Izuku knows that he is a child. Not an adult, even though he likes to think he is a big boy, but not an adult all the same. He isn't tall, doesn't have strong muscles like the heroes on TV, he doesn't even have his quirk. He knows how the other prisoners view him. The child who is too weak to leave his cell without a babysitter. The cellmate of the ex-hero Lady Nagant, the easiest way to get to the ex-hero. The weakest link. He has heard all of this when walking through the halls of cells. Kenshin said to ignore, but it is kind of hard to ignore when everything they say is true. He never felt useless as he does now. He felt like he was just dragging her down with him. He shakes his head, slaps his cheeks and knocks those thoughts out of his head. He doesn't need those thoughts right now. It will just distract him from his upcoming fight. The cell stopped moving and the cell door opened. Kenshin exited the cell and entered the barred room. Izuku stayed back a little and forced his shaking legs to move towards the door. The blast of noise hits the boy right into his face. The shouts and jeers were louder than normal, but now it was just deafening. It seemed like the last inferno of the year was an event the violent prisoners liked. All it did was make Izuku feel like he should curl up into a ball and hide in a corner till it goes away. Unfortunately for him, it doesn't look like that will work right now. He stood next to Kenshin and not behind her like usual. He would have to fight today. Might as well be by her side today. The fighting rings were more numerous than last time. Now there is one big ring like normal, but there were 8 normal-sized fighting rings. It made sense in Izuku's head. There were a lot of prisoners in Tartarus, and not everyone has fought like Kenshin. Most prisoners don't fight in the infernos of months past. Considering that the cells moved after lunch and not dinner like normal, the fights and matches will probably take the entire afternoon and night until all the matches are finished. The noise hasn't got any quieter but has gotten even louder. It kind of reminds him of the cheers a hero would get after a villain fight. Leaving that thought for later when he could deal with it, he went back to observing his surroundings. The high-up cells were connected with stairs and the guards were acting vigilantly. He saw a guard bang on a cell and threaten the occupants. He saw one of the inmates scoff at him and got promptly hit with a baton. The inmate now has a bloody nose. He saw this happen everywhere he looked. Guards with threatening behaviors to keep the prisoner in line. Izuku doesn't even think they are doing anything. Everyone here is a hardened criminal. Those kinds of threats just goes over their heads. His thoughts were interrupted by the robotic announcements. The last inferno of the year is starting. The last inferno of the year is starting. The last inferno of the year is starting. After the sentence was broadcasted for a minute, it stopped and announced. There will be one circle and then the individual fights will commence. Happy New Year! With that declaration, the inmates cheered loudly. He swore that his ears would be ringing after this. Prisoners 469305, 596047, 060789, 146334, 357840, 569305, 295054, 254353, 925739, 025485, 924098, 047539, 356476, 386859, 930868, 435603, 243593, 109568. The announcement named off 50 prisoner numbers and then announced, "Enter the circle." Izuku saw the cell door open and the prisoners leaving their cells. All of them walked to the big fighting ring. He saw that some of the prisoners were arguing, quickly looking like a fight, but the guards broke it up. Every single prisoner entered the ring, some at the edge and some in the middle, generally spread out in the ring. The inmates were eyeing each other, all of them on alert. Start! All the inmates stood still, waiting for someone to make the first move. The fight truly started when one of the prisoners took a potshot at another prisoner and everything went into action. Some went for the closest person while a couple prisoners edged away from the fighting, but weren't that lucky. Soon there was blood splatter and violence in the whole ring. Fists against fists, kicks to the chest and more. He saw one inmate knock another prisoner unconscious and went to back off the fight but got hit in the head and went down hard. Everything was in chaos. The participants were dropping out one by one until there were only 5 inmates still in fighting condition. One had a broken hand, clearly broken by the way it was angled and gave off the feeling of wrongness. Another had a head wound and was bleeding pretty heavily. One had a limp and the other was grasping their chest with their hand, clearly in pain. Only one inmate seemed to be without injury. They circled each other until one finally attacked another prisoner. After that, the inmates were taken down to just 2. The participants were the uninjured one and the one with the head wound. The head wound guy charged the other prisoner and was received with a punch to the ball. The guy went down hard and received a kick to the ribs by his opponent. A foot was placed on the downed inmate's back and the announcement rang. Prisoner 146334 has won. Proceed to your cell. Clean up necessary. With that, the guards got up to the ring and dragged the unconscious bodies out of the ring, each checking if the prisoners were alive. Izuku saw that a guard gestured for others when he checked an unconscious body. He knew what that meant. The prisoner was killed in the fight. The young boy looked at the dead body and shuddered. He gets wake-up calls like this every time there is an inferno. He always realized that no one would care if he died here with how the guards dealt with the body. They got a body bag and just threw the corpse into a cart and wheeled it off somewhere. The only person who he knows that cares about him is Kenshin, but everyone else wouldn't bat an eye if he died. He shivered with dread. After that, the robotic voice announced more fights in the other rings. Every time there was a winner, another fight would be called by the robotic announcer once the ring was emptied. It was just a CYCL of fights with no break in between. The green-haired boy was just watching the fights with calculating eyes. Kenshin realized he had a knack for analysis and gave him assignments during infernos. She would ask him to find out their weaknesses from their movements and figure out how to take them down. After the first couple of infernos, after Kenshin figured this out, Izuku could watch a prisoner fight for a minute and figure out where to attack. Granted, it wasn't foolproof, it was something he could hone into a weapon. She also knew that he liked to analyze quirks, but they had no way to work on that in here unless it was in theory. He would need more experience with that to become a viable option. Well, that is what Kenshin says. Prisoner 656698 and prisoner 058967, go to ring 3. Izuku jumped, not really expecting Kenshin to fight today. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her move to the door and it opened. She walked through it looking unbothered as always, face set in stone. She walked down to the ring closest to their cell and entered it. Her opponent looked normal until you saw that he was at least 6 feet tall and heavily muscled. Her adversary entered the ring and stayed in his corner while he started warming up. Even Izuku can tell that this guy at least knows how to throw a punch. His footing was all right and his posture showed confidence. Most of the prisoners here have some level of confidence, but it is mostly bluffing because most of their power comes from their quirks, not fighting abilities. This guy didn't seem like that though. Please stay safe, Kenshin desperately hoped that she would be okay. She can look after herself, but he always worries. Start. With that, the two prisoners in the ring just stood there, waiting for the other to make a move. They circled each other, looking for a weakness to exploit. Finally, the man had enough and charged Kenshin. He went for a jab to the chest and she dodged. He kept trying to get closer to her and she just moved to his sides, not giving anything to her opponent. He threw a haymaker, but she blocked the blow with her forearm and twisted her arm, going for a joint lock. He saw this happening and backed off before she completed it. He threw another punch to her face this time and Kenshin pushed his arm away before it made contact with her body. It went back and forth for a minute before anything changed. Kenshin kicked the male prisoner in the ball and he bent down in pain. She saw the opportunity and kneed him in the face, knocking him out in the process. Prisoner 656698 wins. He cheered in celebration, happy Kenshin won. He knew that she would win, but she always told him to expect the unexpected. He didn't want to think of a time where she got more hurt than a couple of bruises, but she said to think about it, to make sure he knew what to do if she ever got hurt enough to live in this place. He wasn't happy about it, but he didn't have a choice. Kenshin exited the ring and walked back to the cell. She entered and the door shut with a clang. The young boy looked her over, making sure she didn't have any injuries, and was satisfied when he saw none. She was breathing heavily though, like she ran for a couple of minutes. He looked at her and just smiled with the meaning that nothing was wrong. He nodded and went back to watching the fights. He was watching the fights for a good hour when he heard it. Dread filled his chest and he felt shaky. Prisoner 000666 and prisoner 897537 got to ring 3. He looked at Kenshin and she put her hand on his shoulder and voiced, "Give it your all, kid." He can tell there was more emotion in her voice because it wavered a bit, but he nodded and walked through the door with more confidence than he thought he had. The door behind him clanged shut when he walked through. He breathed in deeply, ignoring the shake in his limbs, and walked to the ring Kenshin fought in. He entered the ring, ignoring the shouts and jeers from the other inmates. Yes, he knew he was a kid, kindly stop saying that. His opponent was a woman. Actually, it was rare in Tartarus to be a woman prisoner. Not many female villains make it here because they were sent to other institutions, that's what Kenshin said anyway. Apparently there were not many female villains in the first place, and not many become high-ranking villains when they do become villains. He thought that was weird. His opponent had black hair that was cut short, barely at her shoulders. Height of 5 feet 8 inches and looked Japanese. She wore the prisoner garb but with the sleeves torn off. What got his whole attention was that her nails were curved like a bird of prey. Obviously a mutant quirk, but that shouldn't be the whole story there. Her nails looked blunted but not enough for them not to be sharp. Mental note, don't get cut. He had a feeling that her fighting style would include slashing motions. She grinned at him, not the kind smile but a smile full of danger and malice. Eyes that held madness and something he did not want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but he didn't really have the opportunity this time. Start. She immediately went to attack him. She raised her hand and slashed down. He moved out of the way and kept moving. Sure, it won't be good in a long-term fight, but he was best at a short-term fight, so he is screwed anyway if this fight was a long one anyway. She kept going after him with an insane amount of intensity. He kept dodging, never backing away because that means he's afraid, but not going closer because of her talents. He studied her form. What foot she led with, where her hands go when not attacking, where her head goes before an attack. He memorized all of it while fighting her. She didn't give him an inch of space to breathe, but he expected that. He kept dodging her strikes, some coming too close to his face for comfort, but he dodged all the same. While he was observing his opponents, unnoticed by the boy, the majority of the prisoners were watching his fight. Every inmate has at least heard about the kid prisoner and wanted to see if the kid was worthy of their curiosity and attention. They just wanted to see if this kid was anything special or, more importantly, entertaining. Izuku was having a hard time. It wasn't possible to keep dodging and blocking hits and got hit a couple of times. He had a 3-inch long cut on his arm, below his shoulder. He also had a cut on his hand when he overestimated the distance for a block, and it was deeper than the one on his arm. It stung pretty bad. If it wasn't for the adrenaline, Izuku would have been crying his eyes out right now. He also got some hits in himself. He almost got the woman to collapse when he kicked her knee. He also got her in the ribs, but there wasn't enough force to knock the breath out of her. Everything came to head when he stumbled. The ring was cleaned, but the blood on the floor of the ring wasn't cleaned off and some haven't dried yet. There were puddles of blood everywhere and he slipped on some but still stayed upright. The woman took the stumble as an opening and managed to slash straight down his face. He screamed. Luckily only one talon scratched his face because the stumble made him back up a bit, so it wasn't all 5 talons at once. From his forehead to his chin there was a bloody gash and was bleeding heavily. Luckily she didn't get his eye, but he was blinded in that eye by the blood that was pouring out of the wound. It felt like his face was split in half. This pain was something he had never experienced before in his entire life. When he was distracted by the pain, the woman inmate slashed again and got him again on his face. It wasn't a straight gash, but he felt it on his nose, stinging painfully across his face, crisscrossing the other wound. He cried out again and made a mistake. His hands were guarding his body, but he instinctively brought up one of his hands to feel his face. His hand came back bloodied, dripping with blood that was supposed to be in his body. The pain kept him distracted enough for the lady to burst forward and manage to get her hands around his throat. He tried to gasp, but nothing came out. He couldn't breathe. He managed to punch the woman in the face a couple times, but she wouldn't let go. Her eyes filled with madness and only squeezed harder. He kept gasping for a breath, but nothing came. His chest felt tight and darkness was edging his vision. He brought a hand up to her face, weak and unable to do anything about his lack of strength. When he did that, he smeared the blood on his hands to her face, making her look more manic. He didn't want to die. He wants to live and see Kenshin again. He wants to breathe, even if it is the air of this prison. Then something happened. When he touched her face, he felt the sparks in her head. It was different though. He felt a particularly strong spark that connected her brain to her arms and hands. It was a strong light and something he felt like he could cut. With that feeling, he mentally commanded that spark to stop. When he did that, the hands around his throat slackened and he got a burst of air. He didn't bother to get a full breath when he punched the woman's throat with renewed strength. She backed up then, gasping for air, and he stood up on Bambi-like legs. He breathed heavily but went on to the offensive. He rushed her when she was trying to breathe and kicked her in the crotch. Sure, it doesn't hurt as much as a guy would have, but there were still a lot of nerves there. That was what Kenshin told him anyway. When his opponent was distracted by the simultaneous pain, he got his foot behind her left foot and punched her in the face. He noticed that she led with her left foot, so when she backed up, her left foot was caught and she tripped and fell down. When she landed, he was there on top of her, punching her face. Right hand. Left hand. Right hand. He kept going until she was unconscious. He stood up shakily, knees weak, blood dripping from his face and hands. He had the feeling that there was blood splatter on his face that wasn't his. He stumbled back, away from his unconscious opponent. He was gasping for breath but wasn't moving. He did that to another human. He was horrified but also knew that he wouldn't have survived if he hadn't. Now he knows why Kenshin said to prepare himself. At least with the people he killed, he didn't do it on purpose. Everything felt a little hazy. He was exhausted. The adrenaline out of his system, and with how he fought with his life on the line, it made sense why he could sleep right then and there. Prisoner 000666 wins. With the emotionless announcer stating that, the inmates cheered. It was explosive and deafening. Izuku exited the ring and headed back to the cell. He entered the cell and immediately Kenshin went to meet him. She checked over his wounds and cleaned them up and used some bedsheets to stop the bleeding. He was so tired that he didn't hear the chants after his win. Never realizing that this moment he gained his second moniker. His first moniker was the Mustafu Massacrer. His second moniker is based after the child of the devil, who is sometimes symbolized by the numbers in evil child. Perfect for a villainous adolescent. Antichrist. Kana was worried. The kid could give a pretty good fight for a newbie, but he was still a kid. When he entered the ring and she saw who his opponent was, she cursed viciously. One of the people she didn't want the kid to fight, not because she was a good fighter, but because that woman was a viscous murderer. She went into a fight aiming to kill, to maim. That woman was also known as the Talon villain, Tala. With over 30 counts of murder and at least 60 attempted murders, she was infamous for being able to get away from heroes. Luckily, the kid won't have to worry about the second half of her quirk. Her quirk is called Electric Talon, able to emit electricity as long as a talon is in contact with something. She was known for paralyzing her prey with electricity and then slashing their throats. She watched the fight with fear for the kid. He was doing a good job with dodging the psychopath, but he slipped up, luckily able to get back to dodging. She saw him watching Tala with a calculating gaze, trying to figure her out. She took notice that he was adept at analyzing and encouraged the skill. If she was outside of this hellhole, she would be tempted to get an IQ test and get the child to do it. He was a very smart kid. Kana held her breath when she saw Izuku get hit. Those will definitely scar. She was afraid when Tala got her hands around Izuku's throat. Kana saw how much Tala was squeezing and how the kid struggled. When Izuku put his hand on Tala's face, she saw Tala's hands loosen. He got up and proceeded to knock out the killer. She let out a breath she wasn't aware she was holding. She heard something about Antichrist from some of the other prisoners, but that can wait. Luckily, even the guards know that sometimes in an inferno sticks are necessary, so they only give one spool of medical sticks with a single needle. Prisoners have to give the sticks and needle back though, because someone tried to escape with a single needle. When the kid got back to their shared cell, she looked him over and decided that he looked like he'd been through hell. His head wounds were bleeding badly and started to drip off his face and onto the floor. She decides to check out the damage after she cleans him up. She got one of the bedsheets and went back to the child. She herded him into the cell and cleaned him up with water from the sink and whipping of the blood with the bedsheet. She tried to be gentle with the gashes, but it was hard. Once the bleeding stopped and all the blood that was on the kid until he could take a shower, Kana looked at him in his entirety. The arm and hand wound were the easiest to clean and would heal easily with some time. His knuckles were blooded and shredded, but that was also an easy fix. His head wounds are where she's concerned. Head wounds bleed a lot, so she wasn't really worried with how much they bled, but when she got a good look at them, she knew that he was lucky that he had an eye. The vertical one started at his hairline and went straight down the left side of his face, barely missing his eye, and stopped at the bottom of the kid's face. The other one was horizontal and goes straight across his face, Not in a straight line but goes across the width of Izuku's face. The wound crisscrosses the other, and now the skin where the cross is in worse shape than any other place. These would definitely scar. He wasn't really slashed but scraped. Tala's talons were blunted, so that makes sense. The skin was basically pulled out and away from his face. Maybe if he had the best medical treatment, he would have a faint scar, but these will be very pronounced. The sticks wouldn't help much in that department. All the sticks would do is stop the bleeding. If it would have been a slash instead of a pull of skin, there would have been a better chances that the scarring could lighten with time. Not with this kind of wound though. She sighed. She hopes they won't get infected. Go to bed, Izuku. You did good. All she got was a nod. She bandaged and stitched the wounds as best as she could with the bedsheets, so now he looked like he had a long eye patch and bad earmuffs. The kid was obviously dead on his feet and he went to sleep. She pushed him onto the bed and he immediately went to sleep. She looked over him for a minute just to make sure his wounds didn't open again. The bedsheets are fine for now, but it won't be in the future. The kid is lucky that his wounds stopped bleeding this soon. She wants to go to bed. She ruffled her hair and went to lay down. The inferno is still going on, but she doesn't care for it right now. Kana is just worrying about the physical wounds this inferno caused, not even thinking of the emotional right now. She knew that Izuku would realize why that fight was necessary, but he was just a kid who just had to beat someone unconscious to survive. There has to be some mental damage with that alone. She still hears cheering from the prisoners who are still watching the inferno, but all she wants to do is shut them up and let there be silence for once. All she wants is to sleep and help the kid. Is that so much to ask? Izuku woke up to pain. His face felt like it was on fire. His exhaustion and the remaining adrenaline in his system kind of numbed the pain when he went to sleep, but now the pain is back full force. He raised a hand to his face and felt the makeshift bindings on his face. He could feel where the sticks are and how. They pulled his skin together. He sniffled and almost started crying from the pain. He never felt anything like this before. The worst pain he has ever felt was scrapped knees when he fell on concrete. His arm also hurts, along with his hand. He never wants to fight again, but the boy knew with certainty that he would have to fight again if wants to survive. Sorry kid, there's no painkillers for inmates, unfortunately. He looked to Kenshin with his seeing eyes that wasn't covered. She sat by the sink and looked at him with sympathy, her purple eyes watching his movements with concern. He pulled himself up with his good hand and got down from the top bunk, his face stinging with pain every time he moved. Those lacerations of yours will take a couple of weeks to heal, so no daring stunts when those are healings. I would say no training, but you seem like that wouldn't be an option. He nodded, but grimaced when he aggravated his injuries. He didn't want anyone to be that close with actually killing him. It was a wake-up call to what could actually happen here. It was different from hearing stories from Kenshin. This place could actually kill a person and have no repercussions. No one was safe, and unless you could take care of yourself, you would die here. The older inmate stood up and went to Izuku. She stood next to him and kneeled down to his height. I can't promise that this will not happen again. The future is unpredictable, but what we can do is move on and make sure that we learn from our experiences. Don't give up, kid. With that, she hugged him. The green-haired boy froze, absolutely still, because Kenshin has never hugged him first. He would always hug her and she would hug back, but this was new. He sniffled and clung to her. He was very close to bawling right now, and the only thing keeping from doing that is the pain it would bring. He felt safe even with the traumatic events yesterday. When they were holding each other tightly, Izuku got a sudden burst of determination. He will not die here. He won't let Tartarus break him. He was going to live. And his quirk will be the reason why. He can feel that with a certainty. Tartarus won't know what it unleashed into the world. It has been 3 years since he was imprisoned in Tartarus. Izuku is now 11 and has learned what he needs to survive in this prison. He knows how to distract the guards. He knows what to say to an angry prisoner to get out without a fight. He knows that prisoners will trade cigarettes for information, who to stay away from and how to escape a bad situation. He even managed to knock out a prisoner when he got into his space and threatened him. Yeah, he has gotten better at fighting. He also is taller now. He used to be 4 feet and 3 inches tall, Now he is 4 feet and 11 inches tall. Apparently he is really tall for his age, but he is still shorter than Kenshin. She calls him Shorty. He is still growing, thank you very much. The real progress was with his quirk. After the fiasco that was his first inferno, he talked to Kenshin about what happened in the fight. When he described the sparks in people's heads and how he could shut them off at will if he could touch them, she had an idea. She thinks he could interrupt and stall brain signals. She also said that he might have awakened his quirk that day when his mom was killed. He didn't know how to feel about it. His quirk saved his life that day anyway, so he chose us not to dwell on it. The question he had now was how he could use an application of his quirk with the quirk suppressor on. The only idea they had was that the quirk suppressor he had on was specially made for telepathic quirks and not for any other type of emitter quirk. Anything else didn't make sense for how he could use his quirk. It was practically a miracle no one questioned why Tala loosened her hands. Kenshin made sure to tell him that if the guards knew he could use his quirk, bad things would happen. Back to his progress on his quirk. The only test subject was Kenshin, and she said it was okay for him to try to figure out this new application of his quirk only if it wouldn't hurt her or himself. He was totally okay with that. With that, they got to how his quirk worked. It turns out that his quirk is very powerful. He could stop any signal from a person's mind to any application of their body. He could even make someone stop breathing because the lungs won't receive a signal from the brain to keep breathing. It's kinda scary with what he could do. Limbs and anything that requires a brain signal to move he can stop from working with a simple touch. Kenshin said that it felt like she was paralyzed. In all actuality, it was pretty safe to experiment. All Kenshin had to do was back up from his touch. She explained to him that if he wasn't wearing a quirk suppressor, he could probably mentally command brain signals to stop from distance. Telepathy was technically just translating brain waves into words after all. This was just a different way to use his quirk. More advanced, but still. Kid. Izuku looked up, shoulder-length green curls moving with a young head to look at his honorary big sister, healed pink scars obvious on his adolescent face. He was practicing knife work with a butter knife they got for dinner the night before. It was plastic, so the guards didn't care about it. He stopped his movements and turned to Kenshin. I don't think that mental capacity is a good name for your quirk. He went to deny it but thought about it. His quirk was named that because of his telepathy. Now that his quirk was not only telepathy but communication and his newfound application. Why now? I had access to my quirk for a while now, why bring this up now? She tilted her head and explained, thought about it recently. It wasn't a problem, just an observation. She went back to what she was doing, a set of push-ups, and Izuku started thinking. Sure, he wasn't really attached to the name mental capacity, but that was the name of his quirk when his mother was still alive. She smiled at him when the quirk doctor explained his quirk, and she was proud of him. He felt that if he changed it, it would break yet another connection with his mom. He didn't want to but felt that another name for his quirk was needed. He hummed to himself, coming up with new names for his quirk, none of them quite fitting. When he was thinking, he remembered the past couple of years. The past couple of years were hard. The last 2 infernos weren't as hard as his first. Considering both of those fights were him going up against normal humans, no mutations, probably both of them had emitter quirks. He was able to beat them in a couple of moves. His training has become more advanced, using more advanced techniques that he learned from Kenshin. Nothing was easy. It was a fight for survival every day. Luckily, he hasn't been backed into a corner since coming here. That is really lucky when he thought about it. With Kenshin at his back, he survived this long. He paced the cell, trying to think of the perfect name for his quirk. Don't think too hard, kiddo. It's not important. You have time. He nodded absent-mindedly at her, obviously not taking her words to heart. Her words entered one ear and left the other. He heard her sigh. She always does that when he doesn't listen to her. He huffed. He went back to brainstorming. Paralyze? No, it doesn't feel right. Plus, it doesn't add to his telepathy part of his quirk. Mind Jack? Cool, but doesn't give off the right feeling to. Izuku. Immobilize? Same with paralyze, doesn't add in telepathy. Psyche? He feels like he is on the right track, not there yet though. He had a light bulb light in his head. He got a perfect name for his quirk. He smiled, a bit proud of himself for coming up with a good name. I just figured out a great name for my quirk, Kenshin. Wanna hear it? He was beaming that sunshine smile at Kenshin, and obviously she wouldn't say no to that face. Go for it, Izuku. She looked at him with curiosity, her purple eyes focused on the green-haired boy. Cerebro, that's my quirk's name. Having the same schedule every day SEGD. It was boring some days and the atmosphere got to Izuku at times. Sure, this place is hard to survive in, that doesn't mean that bad things happen all the time. Some days Izuku just lays in his bunk bed and looks at the ceiling because he has nothing else to do. Granted, if he does that, Kenshin would force him to fight her in a match because he would think too much. Whatever that meant. So now he has a new routine. He plopped onto his bed and groaned. He feels like CRP. He started working out like Kenshin normally does and he feels like he is dying. How does she do this every day? Apparently, since he's older now, he can finally start getting into shape, but if it feels like this every day, he might just die. Stop being dramatic, Izuku. You're not going to die. Oops, he accidentally mumbled that out loud. Everything feels shaky. She snorted, her purple eyes glinting in amusement and maybe some mischievousness. Everyone starts out like that. If you keep it up daily and with effort on your part, you can get muscles in about 3 to 4 weeks. You're a kid, so not sure if you will get muscles though. He groaned again, with resignation this time because he knows that Kenshin is going to push this issue until she gets her way. He has been living with her for over 3 years now. He knows her tells and mannerisms. He kicked his feet up and down on the bed and whined, "It's so tough. Why is it so tough? Are you just doing this to make me suffer? Is that it?" She laughed at his misery. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Also, didn't you say you were bored earlier? He glared at his bed, calling past him an idiot that should have just shut his trap so he wouldn't go through this hell. What was he thinking? Kenshin makes it look so easy in fact he thought he could do it just like her. He was an idiot for even thinking that. Better get used to it now. I will just go harder on you later. He felt instant dread at that. The last time she said something like that was when they both had their first spar. He still shivered from the complete defeat he was forced to accept. She's nice to him in everything but his training. She pushes him hard and never lets up. She's a good teacher but absolutely terrifying in a competent way. He reaffirms the knowledge that she used to be a top-rank pro hero. You're going to do as much as you can every day starting now. No pushing your limits too far though. That could be dangerous. Izuku made a suffering sound, mixed between a groan and whine. He has to do more every day? He's definitely going to die. While the young inmate was mourning his now shortened life, Kenshin sat on her bed. Her blue and pink hair bounced when she sat down. She looked like she was thinking. Her face scrunched up, eyebrows pulled together and lips scrunched. Hey Izuku. Izuku stopped his dramatics to lean over his bed and look down at her from his bed. Can you come down for a moment? I need to test something out. He nodded and wobbled his way down the bed, legs still shaky from his exercise. He got in front of Kenshin and tilted his head. Use your quirk to paralyze my arm for a moment. He nodded his head, wondering where this was going. He reached out his hand and touched her bare arm. He saw and felt the sparks, now known as brain signals, and disconnected the one attached to her right arm. It took a while to figure out which spark went where, but he figured it out after some trial and error over the years. You can stop now, kid. He gave his affirmation and backed up from Kenshin to get out of her personal space. As I thought. He looked at her questionably. She looked at him and nodded to herself. Kid, your eyes glow when you use your quirk. Really? She nodded and he was surprised. His eyes never did that before. It's really faint. It's like how people's eyes shine in the sun. Normal in certain lighting. The only reason I noticed was because we share a space 24/7. So I just have greener eyes than normal? She nodded. He hummed. If that was true, he didn't really need to be paranoid that the guards will see him use his quirk, if the situation is dire enough, of course. It's kinda cool that his eyes glow though. He giggled. He wished he could show Kaken. He stopped smiling when he thought of his best friend. He quickly pushed that thought train out the window. He didn't need to dwell on anything that would cause him to be sad. Not the time for those thoughts. Kenshin noticed his loss of smile and went to another conversation to distract Izuku. He realized her tactics by now, but it leaves him warm and fuzzy inside because it shows that she cares for him. "Wanna ask questions about my quirk?" He nodded frantically. He practically frothed at the mouth with his questions. He waited for so long to ask, but it didn't seem right to ask about it. It was kinda a sore spot for all Tartarus prisoners. No one could access their quirks anyway. Why talk about it when they could even use them, unless it was a mutation obviously. He asked his questions for a literal hour and Kenshin entertained him with a smile. After he was all tuckered out from his questioning, Kenshin said something that surprised him. "My quirk rifle is weird in hero society. You see, I had to get a license to handle a gun even though I have never held a gun in my life. Apparently the hero snipe had to do the same thing. Having a hero license isn't a free pass. Well, it is understandable when you think about it. A gun is as powerful as a quirk if used correctly or incorrectly in bad situations." Izuku was curious. She normally doesn't talk about her opinions on these matters and he wants her to talk about it more. Minor quirks barely do more damage than normal fists, but guns have been around longer than quirks and sometimes even do more damage than quirks. There's a reason why guns are so hard to get nowadays. It's not that the government has its eyes on gun manufacturing, it's just that guns have lost their appeal when quirks appeared. Everyone wrongfully assumes quirks are better than guns, even with how only a minority have an offensive quirk. So people just don't buy them anymore. The only people who use guns are either Yakuza or the police. To Izuku, it feels like Kenshin has a strong opinion on guns, not in the way that she wants civilians to protect themselves with guns, but for the general uneducated knowledge about guns. She took a deep breath from her rant and looked at him. "I had to learn a lot about bullets when training my quirk and came across several things." She shook her head, mumbled to herself, annoyed with herself for apparently going off the deep end. Izuku looked at their shared sink in contemplation. He never really heard about guns unless a hero had one in their fighting style. It's actually really weird when he thought about it. He wonders why low-level villains don't use guns. Whatever, not his problem. Now that I am thinking about it, a gun would be perfect for your fighting style. He whipped his head to her, disbelief on his face. She held her hand up in a wait motion. He kept silent, disbelief still palpable though. If you ever wanted to be a hero in the future, without Tartarus in the picture, you would probably be a rescue hero. You would probably not be a close-range fighter, so you have to have something for distance. A gun would be perfect. She shrugged. Well, no use dwelling on it for obvious reasons. She was probably right. He twitched in his place, twirling his fingers. He bit his lip. He wants to satisfy his curiosity, but it doesn't feel right. Whatever, doesn't really matter if he asks anyway. How would you shoot a gun anyway? Kenshin looked surprised for a moment, but looked at his face and realized it was curiosity that made him ask. I can talk about guns more if you want? He nodded with fervor. He wanted to know everything. She smiled and obliged him. Well, if you want to shoot a gun, you have to get the stance right first. Kana fell onto her bed with a plop. After talking about guns for a couple of hours, Izuku got tired and went to sleep. It surprised her that he was interested in guns. She didn't really take him for a gun enthusiast. Or maybe he was just curious and a new conversation had opened up and it helped him not get bored. Who knows, it's not like she is stopping the questions. She brought up guns because it truly mystified her why not more people used them. Whatever, not like she can do anything about it here. She looked at the top bunk, at the mattress and started smiling softly. This kid has gotten more confident than 3 years ago. When he came into this cell you wouldn't believe it was the same kid that is here today. When she first saw him, it was like all the light had faded in his eyes and now he has more liveliness and smiled more, but he still had some emptiness in his eyes some days. Kana breathed out. She'll do the best she can to help the kid gain more life. He really has come a long way. She frowned. He is 11 now, but she can plainly see that he doesn't deserve to be here. Kana found out about the reason he is here, but she gets very angry when she thinks about it. Sure, he may have accidentally killed a lot of people, he legally shouldn't be here. The worst sentence he should have had was a couple of years in a juvenile prison and some counseling. Not a life sentence in an adult prison, especially not a prison like Tartarus. Kana guesses that the real reason he is here is because the commission doesn't want to bring to light what really happened that day. If more personnel looked at the crime scene, they might realize that the commission assassinated a harmless lawyer to cover up more misdeeds. Yeah, Izuku told her that tidbit of info 2 years ago. She hates the commission so much. Why did she work for them? She scoffed and rolled her body over so her face was in her pillow. Right, she worked for them because they gaslight a just-graduated hero student into thinking she would save more people if she worked for them and not a normal hero agency. Dumbass. She should have looked at the fine print. They asserted all of them. She grumbled angrily every time she thought of her past and past employers. She sighed into her pillow, a bit muffled due to the material. Kana contemplated with herself. Was it wise for her to teach Izuku how to use a gun? She groaned again. Sometimes she forgets that he is a kid. The way he navigates Tartarus nowadays speaks of experience and confidence, and it makes him seem older than he is. Especially in the past 2 infernos. He easily beat them without a single injury. She is so proud of him. It makes her sad though that a kid could lay out a full-grown adult in under 30 seconds. Kids shouldn't have to fight to survive. She rolled around her bed some more, trying to find a semi-comfortable spot on this dollar store mattress. Considering the tax money this prison needs, the warden could give the inmates a decent mattress. She huffed in annoyance. She smiled, one filled with mystery. Kana was happier with the kid here. Sure, their circumstances could be better, but at least she wasn't lonely anymore, even if her only solid company is a kid. The years before Izuku were filled with blank walls and tasteless meals only interrupted by infernos and fights. Now she has something to do and a goal to work towards. Her goal is probably not that achievable, but she can hope. Hope, after all, is one of the rare things she has left. She wants Izuku to leave this prison. If Izuku heard this, he would probably try to stop her. After all, the punishment for trying to escape is death by electric chair. She scoffs at the thought. If she dies, might as well go out trying to dodge her fate. One thing for sure is that she will try to get Izuku out when he is older. And granted, she has a working plan. No way is she willing to risk Izuku's life. No way in hell. A lot of inmates attempted to escape. None succeeded. The security is top-notch. Even if a prisoner attempted to get out, other inmates would snitch on them for rewards. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and Tartarus is a scorpion jar. Only the strongest survive. Whatever. Izuku deserves to be free. She will make it happen if it is the last thing she ever does. It's his birthday again. He is now 12 years old. Kenshin fought in last month's inferno and managed to convince the guards to get a birthday cake for him using her prize from the inferno. The birthday cake just had plain white frosting and vanilla flavoring, but it is the first cake he has eaten in the past 4 years, so he is savoring it. It's the happiest he has been in ages. Truly happy. Sure, his mom may not be there anymore, but at least he has someone in his corner. He liked his lips, trying to get all the frosting he could but failing miserably. Kenshin is laughing at him. Hey, it's not his fault the frosting decided to take the shape of a mustache. She kept on laughing. He growled. It didn't sound very threatening apparently because she just laughed harder. Bitch. He mumbled under his breath. He will have his revenge for this injustice. Looking a bit miffed there, kiddo. Anything you want to say? She had that knowing smile on her face. How does she know what he is thinking all the time? You would have guessed she was the one with the telepathic quirk here, not him. Beach. She faked gasped. What language, young man? Such crude language. No civilized child should swear. With all I taught you, this is how you repay me. He just looked straight into her eyes and stated, yep. Giving not a single F-dash. He lived in a prison for Christ's sake. Of course he heard swear words, some that were especially imaginative. They stared into each other's eyes, not giving an inch until they both started laughing. They couldn't hold it in any longer. This scene was commonplace in this cell the past couple of months. Izuku got the confidence to start talking back to Kenshin, and she encouraged the habitat. Apparently the both of them wanted something new to change around here, so that is what they did. Trying to one-up the other in any way that wasn't determinant to the other cellmate. It was a game of sorts. It made the green-haired inmate happy to banter with his closest friend. Because that is what they are, friends. Once Izuku started to have only a little trouble defending himself, the relationship between the two truly blossomed. It wasn't a stranger-to-stranger relationship anymore. It was more a sibling relationship that surfaced. Kenshin didn't have to be so paranoid in keeping Izuku safe. Sure, she still looked after him, but now he can take care of himself to an extent. Not like how he first arrived. Now in return he helps Kenshin with watching her back. He smiled. He truly has come a long way. Izuku looked at the remaining cake. There wasn't a lot of it left. He could probably eat more later before it gets stale. He put the rest of the cake on the sink, the only raised surface that wasn't the bed, ignoring the toilet. He sighed happily. The cake probably wasn't the best he has ever had, but he can take what he can get. It was good enough. He sat on Kenshin's bunk, sitting right next to his cellmate. He was swinging his legs off the bed, almost hitting the floor with his feet. He truly has grown up. When he came here, he couldn't even reach the floor when he did this. He felt a hand in his hair, ruffling it. Izuku looked up at Kenshin. She gave him a secretive smile and nothing more. He narrowed his green eyes. Suspicious. Very suspicious. She reached under her bed and pulled out something. He looked at it and looked back at Kenshin in disbelief. You said you wanted a notebook, right? Luckily it wasn't a hard request. Here, kid. She pushed the notebook into his hands. He grabbed it with shaking hands and inspected it. It was a normal school notebook, but to him it was the holy grail. He beamed, green eyes sparkling. He always wanted to write in a notebook. Nothing else was quite the same as writing on paper. He hugged the notebook to his chest and laughed happily, happy tears forming in his eyes. Thank you, Kenshin. This is the happiest day in my life. She scoffed, but ruffled his hair all the same. You deserve it, kid. I have some pencils here too. Why don't you break that notebook in? He nodded with fervor and immediately started writing in his notebook once he got his hands on a pencil. He spent the rest of the day with a pencil in his hand, writing down all the observations he had in Tartarus. Obviously the notebook wouldn't be big enough for all his thoughts, but that will be easily solvable in the future. Once Izuku gets good enough to give a good fight to Kenshin, he can enter the monthly infernos. That's in the future though. Now, he is happily spending his time with his new best friend. The writing was hard though. It has been 4 years since he wrote consistently, and it has left its mark. Kenshin tries to teach him what he would have learned if he went to school, but it isn't the same without something to write on. He knows what he needs though, so he is not complaining. He just feels happy that Kenshin would take the time to try to teach him even more than she has. Now, after writing a couple of pages in his notebook, he is getting back into the rhythm. The longer he spends writing, the better it gets. Guess he hasn't lost it then. He went to bed happy, wishing for a boring year in Tartarus. Sadly, that wish was crushed the next week. It started like any other day in Tartarus. Wake up, practice fighting techniques with Kenshin. Work out for as long as needed that day. Attempt to learn more things from Kenshin. Write in the notebook. Pretty normal. What wasn't normal was 2 guards standing outside their cell ordering Izuku to come out. The 2 inmates looked at each other. Kenshin was obviously worried but trying to hide it. And Izuku was afraid. This isn't normal and this has not happened in all the years he has been here. Prisoner 000666, the warden is asking for you. They didn't give him a choice. He was practically dragged out of the cell, handcuffed and put in between the 2 guards. The green-haired boy looked back at Kenshin, catching her eyes. She smiled at him, but he could see that it was forced. The guards jostled him to move, so he did. In all the years he has been incarcerated in Tartarus, he has never seen the warden. Kenshin mentioned she has met him twice. Once when she was first imprisoned here, and the second time when she beat up her first cellmate. She doesn't like talking about it. He was scritted to a corner of Tartarus he has never been to before. He still heard the jeers from the nearby inmates though. They stopped in front of an extra enforced door, but you can tell it was different than a cell. First of all, there were guards outside of the door and it doesn't seem like it automatically locks. The guard on his right saw them coming and knocked on the door. It opened and the guard ushered them in. Izuku felt the door close in his bones with a loud clang. He looked around the room. It was sparsely decorated with potted plants and knockoff paintings. There were no windows, just the same gray walls. The desk in front of him had a few picture frames, but Izuku couldn't see the actual pictures. He could also see paperwork on the desk, and then he saw the room's owner. It was a man sitting in his leather desk chair. He had yellow hair and a big frame, seemingly too big for his chair. The chair looked like it was struggling with the man's weight. The man's back was to him, so Izuku couldn't see his face. The scarred boy stopped his observations when the man turned to him. The man looked him in the eye and Izuku froze under the stare. He felt like he couldn't breathe. The man was radiating bloodlust. It hung heavy in the air. Prisoner 000666, nickname Antichrist and Musudafa Massacre, BRH name Izuku Midoriya. Do you know why you are here, boy? His voice seemed to bear down on the 12-year-old boy, and he shook his head in answer. The warden scoffed, because this man has to be the warden, and shook his head. That beach that is in charge of the HPSC has ordered you to be executed. Lighting raced down his spine, horror filling him. She ordered this years ago, maybe 4 years ago? Not my problem. Anyway, you are ordered to be executed in the coming years. You see, I don't have the option to deny her. If I was in her place, I would have just left you to rot in this cauldron of filth, but what can I say? He shrugged like it wasn't on him, not like he just condemned a kid to death and not fighting for another option. He shrugged like he truly didn't care. BSRD. If Izuku didn't get one of the most horrifying news he could, he would have swore the warden off so hard the warden might see God. Izuku looked up and stared straight into his eyes, and the warden stared back. There was no sympathy there, only cold contempt. The warden leaned into his desk, creaks coming from his chair. Don't think you are getting any sympathy from me, boy. I only see a villain in the skin of a child. He gestured with his hands for the guards to take him away. The guards dragged him out of the room and Izuku wasn't fighting them. The rest of the walk was a blur to Izuku, trying to come to terms with what the warden told him. He snapped out of it when he heard his cell door clang to a close and Kenshin was in front of him. He didn't realize he was crying until now. Tear tracks going down his face. Scars glistening with salty water. Kiddo, talk to me. What happened? He looked at Kenshin and more tears fell. She looked concerned and kind of scared. She never looked scared. His brain was floating and it was hard to concentrate. The quirk suppressor felt heavy around his neck. Izuku. His lip wobbled and he whispered, I'm going to die. Izuku just cried harder after he said that. Kano was rightfully worried when the guards took Izuku. This never really happens. The warden is a dangerous man but generally doesn't leave his office. The only time he leaves it is when a big shot from the outside comes to check if Tartarus is running smoothly. He was a man no one wished to PSS of though. The only time she saw the warden in action is when a prisoner came at him with a shank. She didn't see him move and the inmate had a slit throat and fell bleeding on the concrete floor. After Kana saw that, she promised herself to try to not be on the warden's radar. When Izuku came back, she knew something bad had happened. He was crying like he didn't notice his own tears and his eyes were blank, the normal glint in his eyes gone. She hated it. His scars stood out even more with tears glistening off of them. Kiddo, talk to me. What happened? She felt scared. She knew that Izuku was a tough kid, so whatever got him like this would be bad. She tried to conceal her emotions, but she had a feeling she failed in that endeavor. Especially when she heard his next words. I'm going to die. He burst out sobbing. She pulled him into a hug, but she herself was reeling. Someone will kill Izuku? She will not allow that to happen. She took a deep breath. No use panicking when she doesn't have all the information. Izuku was still crying into her chest when she got herself under control. She patted his back, attempting to comfort the child. It took about an hour for Izuku to calm down. When he stopped crying, he exited her grasp and curled up into a ball. Her heart squeezed. She hasn't seen him do that since the first year of his imprisonment. They're going to have me executed, Kenshin. Her breath stuttered. Horror filled her. This is so much worse than what she was thinking. She bit her lip. Her hands came up to her head and ruffled the hair just so they could do something. The warden said I will be executed in a couple of years, so I won't be killed tomorrow. Not sure if that is any better though. He whispered the last part, voice dripping in despair. She sat next to him, digesting the information. She swallowed. Kana doesn't know what to say. She cares for the child. It felt like her soul was being squeezed through a fruit press. We will figure something out, kiddo. You are not going down without a fight. You hear me? The kid looked up at her. His gaze felt like a shot through her soul. So filled with horror and despair. She hates this so much. If she could kill all of this boy's enemies, she would, just so he wouldn't look like this ever again. He nodded, not fully believing her, but it was a semi-win, so she took it. She pulled him into a one-arm hug, giving all the comfort she could. He leaned into the embrace and stayed there. She couldn't imagine the amount of emotions he was going through right now. He was in the worst prison in Japan for a crime that shouldn't have even happened. His only family killed by the same organization that will kill him. Just when he started to get comfortable here. The universe just wants to see him suffer, doesn't it? He will probably never meet his soul family. That is what is probably getting him the most. If a person dies, that person's mark will be scarred over in the other soulmate's mark. She hugged him into a deeper embrace. He needs all the comfort right now. You have to get out of this place, Izuku. That shocked him out of his pity session. But you said that everyone who attempts to escape gets killed. His face was killing her. She can't deal with this. Yeah, and if you stay here anyway, you'll get killed anyway. Might as well try. Nothing to lose. Kenshin, you would also take the blame. She shrugged. Don't care. All I would do is stay in this room for the rest of my life. I won't miss much. But you, Izuku, you have your entire life to live. I can't stomach that you will never be free again. Understand? He obviously didn't, with how his eyes were filled with confusion. He nodded anyway though. He looked conflicted. Don't worry about that now. She brushed his hair from his face in a comforting gesture. Just don't think about it too much. We can talk later when you feel better. He nodded, the blank stare was back, but he moved to his bed. He laid down but obviously wasn't sleeping. Just thinking. She sighed. Normally Kana would distract Izuku from his thoughts, but she herself needed to think things over. She laid down herself. This has to be one of the worst days in her stay in Tartarus. And that was surprising in itself. Tartarus was shitty in the first place. The warden sat in his office chair. He grumbled to himself. No one was in the office with him, so they couldn't see his face. His face was the definition of uncaring. Sure, if anyone saw him condemning a child to death, they would be horrified. Of course not him. There was a reason he was the warden. He was placed as the warden of Tartarus because of his uncaring nature. The only reason he was here was because of the money the president of the commission paid him to keep the prison under control. And with that power, she had the capability to order around even the warden of Tartarus. The warden opened up a cigarette pack and lit up a cigarette. He put it up to his mouth and inhaled. Once he puffed out the smoke, he grumbled. That vixen is stirring up things again. Demon hag.